Welcome to the In Search of More podcast. I am your host, Eli Nash. Join me weekly on my quest for more from myself and more from this world. We'll see you on the other side. All right, welcome, Sony.
Welcome. That was amazing. Welcome. I've been looking forward to this very, very much. Thanks for having me.
Likewise. I'm sitting here with Sony Perlman. And why don't you say who you are and what you do?
Oh, no. Who I am is a much harder question than what I do.
Let's say who you are professionally.
Yeah. So, obviously, I'm a father. I'm a husband, father, lover of my family for number one. But for my work, I've been working for a little over 25, 26 years in the addiction world, trying to, in different capacities, trying to help people who are struggling with addiction, mainly. I'm also a therapist, social worker, an addictions counselor. Where I started, I run a program called Our Place, which is a big drop-in center in Brooklyn, and as well as a new program, which is Our Village Sober Community up in Muncie, which is newer. It's about 4 years old, and that's been kind of my main passion.
So Our Place is your project, or someone who started? And you
I came in around 4 years in.
And that was how long ago?
That was 22 years ago.
Got you. Okay, so you've been with this for a while.
Yeah. You should say I look young. No? I'm not. No. I'm fishing for compliments. But I started around 22 years ago. Basically, Our Place opened as like the first Jewish drop-in center for what they call kids at risk in the community, which is basically kids that were falling out of the system.
Can you explain the term drop-in center?
So drop-in center it's not a place you live or a school, or it's just a place you would come at certain hours. So for us, it's nighttime, and you could, if you're accepted, you could come, hang out, and then there's a ton of services as well as like food and a gym and, all these different activities and stuff like that. So it's essentially like a boys club, but it's known as a drop-in center. I don't actually know.
It's for men and women? Boys and girls?
So we have a boys one and we have a girls one. And also part of Our Place is something called the living room, which Menachem Poznansky runs.
Oh, yeah, I'm familiar with that.
Part of Our Place. And then Our Village is also part of Our Place. But the drop-in center, what happened, the backstory of it is that they opened it as a bunch of like lay leaders in the community, just volunteers, and they had no idea what they were doing. But it was successful in terms of people coming, but then like all chaos erupted because there was no professionalism. They couldn't really figure out what to do with kids that were really struggling with different stuff. So at that point, they brought in a couple of professionals. I was very young, but I was a professional. I was the addictions counselor. Shimon Russell was the person who was my direct supervisor. He came in, and we kind of turned it into a hybrid professional, non-professional place.
Which means?
Which means it's a fascinating thing because drop-in centers, and I'm talking about it for the first time, but drop-in centers kind of usually lead one way or another. So the kids come in, and they're kids that are not used to following the regular path. So
you're talking what age kids, like teenagers?
So 14 to 20 is the average ages. You need exceptions to come in younger.
So they have homes, but let's say they're not so comfortable with their parents or...
So that's one of the struggles is some of them are actually homeless, some of them are out of school, some of them are on the street. It's a real mix of kids. Actually, with Our Place, if you're in a regular school in the community, you can't come in. You had to have dropped out of school or be in some sort of special school to be able to get into Our Place. So Our Place was very unique in the sense that drop-in centers usually go one way or the other. They usually go very professional and like they kind of look a little clinical, and the adults love that. And then, or they're like total chaos where like kids would come in and run the show, and it's just like all over the place. And the kids love that, but they're not getting help, and the kids are not showing up to the ones who are super professional. So the parents are like, oh, that place helps, but that's really where the both of them went. And I had found, and this is fascinating because the answer is an ancient answer of order and chaos. that you need to have the yin and yang, where you have to have the professionalism and the boundaries and how things are run and the services, but it has to feel like chaos.
So you sit on the chaos side, the order side, or managing both?
The reason I have been so successful at it is that somehow, personally, I'm smack in the middle of both of those. Like I think I am always fighting for order and staring deeply into the abyss of chaos almost simultaneously, which drives me crazy as a human being. But I can't. Every time I'm leaning a little bit to one, I have to fight to go to the other. It doesn't work for me to go to one side or the other. I get very, my anxiety will start spiking. So I actually was the perfect person for that job, because most people are more comfortable in one of
Right,
those.
so you modeled it essentially after you.
Right. And it happened to work for that particular position.
Got it, and it works that you've been in the position for a while.
Yeah. But right away, I was I tuned into it. I was like, this is what's needed. And it's remained an incredibly popular place with kids. And the feeling of the place, you could walk in and have no idea that you could get help there. You could stay there for 4 years thinking nothing's happening. Meanwhile, we have therapy going on, and we have job placements, we have GEDs going on, and all that stuff's happening. Like, if you want the order, it's there. If you want the chaos, it's there as well.
Understood.
So if the kids see too much order, they're fighting that. So it's a beautiful balance, and I think for that particular position, I was kind of born for that.
Where is it physically located?
It's on M and 18th in Brooklyn, the boys' one. Then there's a girls' one, which is on Avenue J in Brooklyn.
And living room is what? Living room I've been to.
So the living room is actually, it grew out of our place. And I'm actually one of the, I would say, founders of the living room. I actually had the offer to go run the living room, and I chose not to, kind of for this reason of the order and chaos. The living room is much closer on the order side than on the chaos side. Like, there's a lot more order to it. But basically, the living room, what happened was, in our place, we discovered there's a lot of addicts, and they were struggling a tremendous amount. And we really weren't offering 12-step meetings or anything like that. And we started sending people to rehab. They were coming out of rehab, and it was a bit of a disaster, because they were all falling, and there was nothing to hold them.
Right.
There was nothing to hold them. So, and even if there was something to hold them, there was nothing that was being understanding of these people coming from their community of an Orthodox Jewish community. So they didn't have the ability to understand what it's like to come from an Orthodox Jewish community. So, I mean, you'd have meetings, but they had no understanding. It was
so
all
now if someone is struggling
non-Jewish.
specifically with addiction, you'll send them to the living room.
Right, so they'll end up at the living room. And then, but the living room is mainly like post-rehab. Like, we had, in our place, we'll send them to rehab. When they come out, they come back to our place, but there's tons of drugs going on. Like, our place, you're allowed to do drugs, alcohol, not in the actual place, but everybody's accepted. So we're not at all picky about what you do. You could only be too good to come to our place if you're in a good school. Like, sorry, we've had kids go, I'll do drugs if you let me in. But yeah, it's really our place is such a beautiful concept in a community, because it's the safety net of the community. It's really a message to every kid that this community has a place for everybody. It might not look like, a yeshiva, but we're not letting you go. And I think that's incredibly unique.
Is it
in our
similar
history.
to, say, do you know Aliyah in Crown Heights?
Yeah, Aliyah's, actually, I'm very, very close to them. There was a time where they had no money, and I had tons of money because I was getting all this government funding. Mm-hmm. And Moshe Feiglin, I said, Moshe, I have money. Why don't you bring your guys on trips with me? So I took them on all these crazy trips. We went on 5-day trips, 6-day. We had all this money floating around. So actually, we've been close since then. This is 16 years ago. So it's very similar to Aliyah. And it's also fascinating. I'm very close with all the programs that are doing this, and I'm always fascinated by how everybody kind of does it a little different. So it is different. That's a much more of a Chabad twist.
Every community needs something different
Right.
that needs it catered in there.
Which is great. because they understand their kids the best. Like if I walked in and tried to be working in their community, I'd be missing a million things. So yeah, I'm very close with them. And they had YAM back in the day. There was a program called YAM.
Yeah, I remember that, but
It kind of ended, yeah.
I think when I was a teenager in Crown Heights, I think that was around.
Yeah.
And what's Our Village, you said?
So Our Village this is where I saw a huge hole, and this has been my passion project. So Our Village technically it's a sober living home. That's where it starts. And there are a lot of sober living homes, halfway houses they're called, where you come in and there are certain rules. You got to follow the rules. There's different levels. You could go. This is post rehab, and if it works for you, it works for you. If it doesn't, it doesn't. What I started seeing is that the problem is that it became another program, and what was happening is that people never landed in an actual community that could hold them. So we built it not as a home, but as a community. So it's got around 50 kids, not 50 kids, like 50 different people in the community that are now, it's been 4 years, but about half the people stay. And they stay in the community, do step-up houses. It's a very inclusive community, so that there is no way to really fall out of that community. And that's the problem that I found is that there's a lot of different ways to like wake somebody up and say like, here's the problem, maybe even here's the solution, go do it. And then there's
Who are you trying to wake up? An
collapse.
individual?
What's that?
Individual or the community? Who are you trying to wake up?
Who am I trying to wake up?
Yeah.
I'm trying to wake myself up. What do you
No,
mean?
meaning in this example, you say there's a challenge with waking people up. Who you trying to wake up? Are you saying there's a challenge with waking up?
Oh, no. I'm saying is that there are a lot of ways that we could wake someone up. We could say, hey, here's the problem. You have addiction. This is what you have to do to fix it. There's a lot of what I call like Mount Sinai moments, Har Sinai moments, where you like touch God, you see God, you feel God, you know the answer, you feel hope, you feel connected, and then 40 days later you're serving the golden calf again. Because there is a collapse afterwards, that nothing was holding the person so that they could do the work. And then there's so in essence, we're the 40 years in the desert, but we're the cloud and the fire and all that.
So let me make sure I understand. So Our Village is a home, a center?
It started with a home. Now it's 5 homes. Now we're starting with women's homes, so that'll be the 6th home, hopefully in August.
So it's a home filled with beds?
It's, beautiful, beautiful home, because that's very important, because you got to feel like a king and queen to do this process. But it's filled with home. It looks like a sober living home, like it's a home. You don't walk in and see like slogans like day at a time or stuff like that. It feels like a home. All the work you got to do is outside the home. But everybody goes to work during the day, and then there's
So these are people post-rehab?
Post-rehab. So the best way I could describe it is a sober living on steroids, like the amount of support. I'll give you an example. Everybody who ever goes to the home could come back and eat dinner every single night. So I'm cooking, I have 12 people in the home, the original home, and I'm cooking for 50. So they all come in, because there's no way to graduate the home. You're now in the community, and you could use from the community, you could drink from the community, you could help back in the community. So that is the thing that I found that was really, really missing, is that you didn't have these incredibly strong communities that will hold you. So it's like I figured out not what you need to fix yourself, but I've identified what you need in order for the fixing to work. So the example I would give is you get, let's say, a homeless guy on the street, and he's like sleeping on a cardboard box in his own piss every night, and he's miserable and he's not living life. And then you get him the absolute best therapist. And he goes for the $800 an hour to the top therapist in Manhattan, and he has a great session, and then he goes back to sleep in his own piss that night. That is not how he's going to heal. And meaning, nobody will guess that will do it. But what we're doing is we're taking people, we're giving them a tremendous amount of healing. So I'm pro all the types of healing. And we could talk about all the types of healing and all the therapies. And I think there's a little bit of like a matchmaker thing, like what works for what person. And that's very important. But I know one thing is if you're homeless or your environment is toxic, no matter what you do, you're back on the street at the end of the day. So that's where I saw a huge, huge hole in the system. And I took away a lot of the stuff that I thought was a waste. Like, for example, and this is controversial, is that I don't agree with partial hospitalization programs. It's called PHP or IOP, like intensive outpatient programs, which is what everybody suggests, is that when you're done with rehab, you should just keep going on tons and tons of therapy all day. I haven't seen it helping people. I'd rather spend all my time and energy making this person feel safe and learning how to get a job than to spend all my time, coloring books and horses and the best therapies and everything, because they don't know how to live. So
what you're offering is what? Is a place to be safe?
I'm offering
a non-toxic
the way
environment.
to really, really understand it is if you have to understand how I view addiction.
Okay.
Okay, so I have to go back to understand what I'm trying to say, because you're just making a really good sober living home. That's kind of what it sounds like. But if you understand addiction, the way I see it is that addiction is just an enormous loss of self-esteem, meaning you have absolutely no self-esteem. The lower your self-esteem, the higher your addiction. And the way I see addiction is an external self-esteem. We go through difficulties in life. We have emotions. We use our self-esteem to overcome that, or self-worth or other words. But self-esteem is what we use to deal with it. If I don't have that for one reason or another, then I have to use something external to make myself feel better, just to manage. It's not about like chasing, something that feels great. Every addict will always tell you it's just making me feel all right. It's not making me feel amazing. Maybe it makes me feel amazing the first time or the second time, but I'm just trying to be like you, a normal guy who could get through his day, and I have to use something from the outside. You could use something from the inside. And the way I see it is with, the allegory of a gas tank and an engine, where as a kid, our gas tank is filled with this unconditional love, and you're just filled up until you feel this real sense of worthiness. I deserve to be here. I am special. That's what gives us all our ability, our hope. That's our gas in our tank. And then we get the next level, which is this is how you drive the car. You make a right here, you make a left here, go climb the tree, go learn how to cross the street. We trust you, we believe in you. And then you have worthiness and competence. That's what makes up a self-esteem. The problem that I found with addiction is that something happened that destroyed, that made holes in this tank. So you could have had a full tank. Parents could have given you a tremendous amount of love. You could have had uncles and aunts and grandparents, and it was filled, and you felt worthy. And then things like trauma come along, and they put holes in that tank. Trauma does the one thing that makes you an addict. It tells you that you're not worthy, because the core belief of every addict is I am essentially unlovable and unworthy to be here, which means the tank is not holding the gas to run the car. So most addicts, and I deal with them, and most addicts are incredibly competent. The car is not the problem. So we say, okay, well, if you learn how to make your bed and get a job and all this stuff, they're like, I could do that. But after a month, I need to go use drugs again, or I need to use some process again to make myself feel better, because my tank is empty and I got nothing to feel better with. So the tank is empty, and because of that, what I've discovered, and also my team together have discovered, that the only thing we should be focusing on is the tank. And the car we can leave for a little bit later. So the problem is that we have this empty tank, all this unworthiness, and we have to do two things. We have to put patches on it, and we have to refill it. And the two things, the techniques we use, which is very simple in the program, is the patches they're going to test us. They're not going to get out of bed. They're not going to make their bed. They're not going to go to work like we want them to. They're going to, good example, they're going to eat all the whites on the black and white cookies and leave it in the pantry. They're going to do things that drive you crazy, but that's just them saying, like a child would say, because addiction is an emotional child. They go back to a place where I don't know how to deal with these emotions like a child, so I'm in a dependent state. They're saying to you, am I worthy? Our response is yes. And the only way to do that is not to say, go get a job. You're worthy, and this is why, and this is how we're going to prove it. So we first have to pass their test. That's the patches. And then we have to add stuff. We have to give them stuff. Like you ask, like, what does it look like? They have to have a beautiful bed. They have to have great food. We have a private chef. I don't even charge so much. I spend a lot on the fact that they know the nurturing is happening on a very high level, because they have to know that they're tremendously loved.
People are staying there normally for how long?
So the average stay is around 6 months. And most people never want to leave. It is expensive the first part, not that expensive, but it's expensive enough that you have to move on. And then we have the next level, which you could stay kind of indefinitely if you want to. It's called step-up houses. It's just sober apartments. So all you have to be is sober, and that's the only rule. You pay your rent, you're sober, you're good. And there's no staff there or anything.
Yeah, you live your life.
And you live your life. There's literally a zero
the benefit you get is
relapse
the community
rate in there. It's just they're coming back on a daily basis, helping out. It's absolutely incredible. So, yeah.
So that's really about being part of a community of sober.
It is 100% about being part of a community, but it's also understanding that the person you're seeing in front of you is a perfectly fine person. They just don't believe they're lovable. And that's all we're working on. Later we'll work on the deep therapies. We'll work on wherever you go. I am so against doing trauma therapy for someone who doesn't know how to deal with their emotions. Trauma therapy is traumatizing. It's difficult. It's great for a year in recovery. It's absolutely terrible for a guy who doesn't even know how to be happy. Happiness makes them want to use drugs because it's an emotion that's too overwhelming for them. Every single thing is difficult for someone who does not know how to manage their emotions.
So what do you do for them?
So what we're doing is we're passing these tests. We're just focusing on that first stage of
okay. So when someone calls you,
lovable.
so the average person who reaches out
right
to you for help, where are they in the process? Do they recognize they have addiction? Have they tried and failed?
It's post-rehab.
Post-rehab.
It's post-rehab. We would like to make a rehab also, because a lot of rehabs are not understanding our process. Like, what do you mean you're not keeping them in PHP and IOP for as long as you can? And I don't.
But in
agree with
rehab,
that.
they've done trauma work. They've done some of this other
yes.
stuff.
So I actually don't have a problem with that. I have a problem. What happens is I actually was talking to Faith Niece about this today. It was an amazing podcast. But I don't have a problem, like the example I gave before, like the Mount Sinai moment. I don't have a problem with the thing that wakes you up. If you're told, hey, this trauma, hey, there's these things, they're there. These are all the things you're going to have to fix. To me, rehab is like looking at a crystal ball. Like, this is your future. For the next 5 years, this is what you're going to be working on. The first stage of it, and this is what happens, this is probably the reason most people relapse after rehab, is they come out thinking, I'm ready to do this. My car is ready to go. They told me about my trauma. I've been working on it. I got EMDR. I got all the work behind me. I'm ready to go. And then they collapse immediately, because they were just being held in a cocoon and being told that these are the things you got. You got a view. It's like that other allegory of, like, you're in a storm and you see lightning in the distance. So you know where to go. But there's a lie there being told that you have to work on this today, because you can't work on that until you're strong, until you could hold yourself. So, like, I don't know the answer to every person how they have to heal, but I do know what they need to help them get there, the support and community and family that you need to make you get there. And that's what we've discovered. I will tell you that
I've seen that. So I know someone who's been, I think, to rehab 4 times in the last year and comes out relapses every time.
Every time.
Okay, so what you're trying to do is offer something to this guy.
Yeah.
Okay, so when he comes out and relapses, I mean, obviously he ends up doing drugs, right? That's what I mean by that. So how do you prevent that from happening in your environment?
Well, we really only have one carrot, and that's that it's so yummy to live there, they don't want to give up that opportunity. Meaning, it could happen. They could relapse. It's rare. because they move into a community that just feels wonderful. Like they finally landed in a place that it just feels incredible. It just feels wonderful. And that's on purpose. It's
So how are you
manufactured
making
that
it
way.
feel wonderful? Is there a lot of support staff?
In every way. The first thing you walk in, you're being told, like, thank you for allowing us to be part of your process, and we're going to be the best support. First thing you do, what are your favorite foods? Write them down, and we get them their favorite foods. We cook them
someone
their
living in the
favorite
house?
foods. Well, yeah, we have 3 people living in the house.
Gotcha.
Different counselors. We have 2 main houses, so there's 3 counselors living there. We have a clinical director who's working on setting up all their therapies and all the stuff they need to do. But the main thing is that they're literally falling into like an incredibly loving embrace. And there are no consequences in the house. They're being, even though emotionally they're feeling like children, they're treated like adults. I mean, there are no consequences. Either you're in the house or you're not in the house, but we don't have a middle consequence. If you don't do a chore, there's no consequence. We may discuss it. There's absolutely no consequences. Our belief is that everybody wants to make their bed. Everybody wants to wake up on time. And not doing that is just an indication that something's wrong. It's an outcome. It's not like someone chooses to not do that. When their tank is full, they literally get up and go. You have little kids. This is all attachment model stuff. Like when a kid is done with the embracing and the love, they hit the terrible twos and they say, no, I want to move on. Thank you for the love, but I want to walk out of this room. And they get like object permanence. They understand like this love is with me. I've put it in my heart and I can walk the other room. We believe, and we've seen it happening over and over, that if you just work on the first stage of literally like re-raising the child inside, if you just work on that, they just go to their job. Like I've had some of the most successful people didn't work for 5 months. I don't put them in IOP. I say, you stay here. You need to be held. It's going to be fine. We bring them tea to their room. You're depressed, it's fine too.
So the only thing you don't want is them using drugs.
That's the only like contract to be in the house. Like, don't use drugs so that we could do this process with you. And even if they use, we work with them. But it's rare. Even if they use, no one gets kicked out. We need to put you in a place that can handle where you're at right now, and then you come back. It's not like a kick out.
Got it.
And I think if you haven't gotten to speak to anybody, but if you speak to anybody from the program that got kicked out, you would understand it. They don't say that. I'm so close with them. Actually, my biggest funder today, I kicked his son out of the program, and his son is actually one of the biggest funders of the program now too. The one I kicked out, and I love him dearly. And I'm like closer to the people I kick out sometimes than the regular people, because there's no way to leave. And even guys who have relapsed, they're still part of the community. You can't leave.
How many people can you service at any given time?
So right now we have 33 beds that are in-house. We also have people that got married. They live in the community. They have apartments. We have single guys that have their own apartments. So in the community it is around 50 people. We have actual beds for 33.
But over the course of time, you've had hundreds?
No. Since COVID was a real problem. We a little over 100 people since we started, really.
Got
But
it.
about 50% of them
And the homes
are still
the
there.
homes are where?
In Pomona, New York.
Got it. So
And-
considering the size of the problem, it's touching a
It's
few
nothing.
souls. Yeah, it's nothing.
Really,
So-
my mission is that I almost want to call, you ever hear smart recovery? A lot of people in the recovery world know that smart recovery. I want to call this dumb recovery. I want everybody to do this. Like, stop telling someone the way to stop doing drugs is stop doing drugs. Oh, you're lying in bed? Why don't you get out of bed? That's what we say to people and think that's healing them. Oh, you don't think I know I got to get out of bed? I'm not an idiot. I can't get out of bed. So, like, we literally have a program where we are forcing them, we're trying to force them out of their problem without actually looking at it and saying, how do we rebuild this person's self-esteem? How do we make it happen?
And how do you measure success? How do you know you're doing well?
Well, I mean, It's a really interesting question because every person's different in terms of success. We have the basic measure, which is if they're still sober after a period of time. And we do have numbers for that. They're over 80% at this point from the long-term success rate, which is like outrageous in these programs. But I don't even consider the guys that are using to not be successes. A lot of them have jobs and they choose to go back to some form of using. And I know I get into trouble for it, but they're living successful lives, and maybe they're drinking a little, maybe they're smoking. I'm not making a statement whether I agree with it or not, but I can't say that these people are not having decent lives. Some of them,
And it's significant progress from where they came.
Right. They're like living like beautiful, inspiring lives where they are helping and being part of community. In the last 5 months, we had 6 marriages in the community. These are not people that are stagnant. They're trying to have relationships with people. It's like daily miracles of watching.
So what's your
these
vision
lives.
for this?
My vision is that everybody does this.
This is a nonprofit, right?
It is a nonprofit, yeah.
So your vision, when you say everyone does this, means
My vision is that we already have the infrastructure all over the world of sober livings, of halfway houses. Dumb it down. Meaning everybody could literally do this. We could change the system of healing. We could change the numbers overnight if everybody just stopped trying to fix the car when you got to fix the tank. And it's constant. I have a guy here, Shua Rosen, down in Florida, and he was, so he would call me and say, what do I do with this guy? And I'd say, like, did you try taking him a tea and, like, talking to him? And just say, we love you, and I've been depressed, and I didn't want to get out of bed. Did you try that? He's like, what? Like, try that. And a week later, the guy's back at a job because it's not like magic. It's just that guy wants to have a job. He just can't, he's just feeling empty right now, and he needs to be filled. So here's a fascinating thing, because this is an ancient thing that we've been doing. Because one of my real questions in Judaism was like, why doesn't it address this topic?
of addiction.
Of addiction and also trauma. Like why isn't it really addressed? And I recognize this is many years ago, and we've built the program kind of on this concept that Shiva is it's like Shiva house rules. That's what we call what we do, is that when you lose somebody, so you could go from feeling completely worthy and having a fairly decent life where you're coping with difficult issues, and then you lose a spouse or you lose a parent. Immediately, the gaping God-sized hole that could just be ripped right out of your heart happens, and it's the hugest trauma. And you can believe, like, I'm not worthy of love anymore. I'm unlovable right now. It's like the worst level of trauma. And what do? We say, stop doing the mitzvahs, sit on the floor. We're responsible for your healing. The community is responsible for your healing now. And they say, I want to get up, I want to work. No, you're not allowed to get up. Sit down. We're going to bring the food. We're going to bring the love. We're only going to talk to you when you're ready to talk to us. They have to call you over to talk to you. All these rules are so beautifully empathetic. No one's saying, like, when you imagine walking to a Shiva house and walking over to a guy and like, just get up and get a job. What's wrong with you? Just get a job. Why don't you go get a job? What are you, a bum? Sit on the floor like that? That's essentially what's happening to enormous amounts of traumatized people who just need enough to fill their tank and to keep going. And by the way, I want to say, this is not just addicts. We all have times in our lives and even times in our day where we feel so empty that we need love. And if you take away someone's family and you take away someone's community and support network, we're all screwed. If I don't believe my community loves me, I'm done. We are pack animals. We need our people. So my mission is not just to create the greatest program in the world, which I think I have and I will, and it'll keep growing. My mission is that everybody looks at it and goes,
can we do it too?
Oh, we could do that. It's not only we could do it, it's easier. It's happened on a very small scale. I speak to other colleagues and they're like, how are you getting so much success? Like, you're literally cutting out all the hard work. Imagine if you worked in a sober living and never had to discipline somebody. That's half the burnout of the people working in the sober living. So you just say, don't discipline them. Try
so
that.
let's take the problem upstream a little bit, meaning okay, so you found a solution that can work for 30, 40, 50 people, let's say.
Right.
This next community will do the same thing.
Right.
And on, and you have your vision. But the numbers of people that are needing this are through the roof.
Yeah. The homes are already there. I'm just talking about changing a philosophy.
Right, but I'm talking about if you take the problem upstream, how do you prevent so many from needing a Shiva house without experiencing the death of a loved one?
This is a question that almost makes me cry, and I'll tell you why. Because the depth behind this question is, why the hell is this problem so absolutely massive right now?
Yes.
Like, why is it? And we call it addiction, but we freaking all have it. Everybody is living without community. Before the podcast, I was talking about, like, what home has a grandparent in it? How many uncles and aunts do my kids have? We all used to live, I'm not talking Jewish even, I'm saying everybody in society 200 years ago didn't move 50 miles from their home, ever. And in, like, low-income, countries, it's still like that. Like, you do not move. You're stuck in a community, and we all need each other. There's like all those African proverbs, like, a child, it takes a community to raise a child. These are very real. I'm raising a family with my wife, and there's so many times I've looked at my wife and said, we're not enough. It's just two of us. And we have a human being, a full human being that we're responsible to be everything for. And what if they get angry at me? What if my kid gets angry at me? You should go to my brother and yell about how big a jerk I am, or go to his grandparent and get chicken soup. Yeah, your father, he was a jerk when he was a kid. Like, you need that. That was part of the community. This problem goes back. It's interesting because it really goes back to the same time psychology was being created, which is the Industrial Revolution, where everybody left these tiny towns and went to the cities, and this concept of, like, you leave home. That's what you do, and it became part of it, and the community has fallen apart. Now, I think the Jewish community is doing a fantastic job in some ways, in probably better than most communities in the world, and I'm super proud of that. But just the idea, like, I meet people that are from my old community, and they're still living there, and there's, like, I'm programmed to kind of smirk at it. Like, you haven't moved on. You haven't moved out of your little tiny life. But the truth is, you're not supposed to. You're not supposed to change your support network every 7 minutes. And now our average time of moving is, I think, 6 years, where people move every 6 years or something like that. And the divorce rate's through the roof. And, like, we don't.
So you see this as the problem.
So I'm saying is that this is the problem, is that we're creating communities for, we're patching up a massive leak. And this is why the question's so depressing, is because it's not just addicts. I get 3 phone calls for every one. It's just mental health issues. I call them failure to launch. They're 29 years old. They're lying in bed. They can't move. But you know what? They were a good boy, and they didn't use drugs. So now what do I do with that guy?
So you'd like to go back to 200 years or pull
no,
things
so
from it? Or
what I would like, I call my podcast Brainstorm, is that we should be sitting down and going, how are we going to evolve into a world where so many amazing things happen? I don't want to knock the world we have. We all live in wealth. We all have food all the time. We all have a house. We all have a car. It's a crazy life. We have all this beautiful stuff. How do we bring back the community into this? I'm seeing what I'm doing as an experiment. I'm doing it with addicts because addicts are a caricature of the worst level of pain that you could have. But everybody's feeling this. How do we bring this back? I also created something called Mavaksham Anonymous, which is just a bunch of friends, and we get together, and it's like a men's group, but we have 7 people. We close the group and we sit and talk for 2.5 hours every Friday. We talk almost every single day on the phone.
Like a men's group.
It's a men's group. And we help each other move. If a guy needs a little help with money, we all chip in. Like we're holding each other the best we can in every way. We're creating that because it doesn't exist. And it's getting worse and worse as far as I can tell.
Okay, so what you're saying as a solution is intentionally creating community because it used to be there by default, so now we have to intentionally create it.
Right. Something wonderful happened, that we have so much wealth and all that, but there's an unintended consequence that we've lost each other. And that is the pain. And I will tell you that all addicts are, let's say, highly sensitive people. This world can't tolerate, the highly sensitive people cannot tolerate this paradigm that's happening right now.
So let me push back against it
Yeah.
a little bit, even though this podcast is not called Brainstorm, but
Okay.
get there anyway.
That's a good plug, though. Thank you.
But I'll push back against it just because if I look at my parents, like grandparents, great grandparents, what it seems to me is that there existed a tremendous amount of pain and trauma, just an inability, but almost in a negative way, an inability to work with it, to process it, to do anything about it, because they were in straight survival mode. I'd think about it like, if not for Instacart, my life would be significantly busier. Just making sure my family has enough food. So now it's, oh, we forgot something, you order it, and an hour later it's there. If every single time I was running out to the grocery store, I probably wouldn't have enough time to do a podcast.
Right. That's true.
Right, but my point with that is that we live in an environment now where we have a lot more choice with our time than existed back then. But what it seems to me is that despite the fact that our grandparents had communities, there were still people being abused. There were
Yes.
still people being hurt. In many ways, possibly worse than now.
Yes.
There wasn't necessarily the luxury of falling through the cracks, but not because there wasn't pain. There weren't the choices available, meaning if you didn't, today an addict can somehow, I meet some of these guys, I'm like, okay, you don't work, but somehow you have enough money to have a car, to get to have food. Like they're somehow managing in life. And I don't know that 50 years ago you could have managed in this way without food. But between credit cards and parents with larger homes, or however it is that they manage their life, they seem to somehow have enough to not be homeless.
Right.
And maybe it's generous Jewish organizations, whatever it is, somehow there's that ability to access it. So what I'm saying is, what I'm pushing back against is that the community was a solve for all. That's what I'm saying. Meaning there definitely seems to me that there was a fair share of pain, trauma, confusion, and hurt in those times.
100%. I 100% agree. I don't think that we even have more trauma and pain and hurt than they had then. I don't think we had that. I actually think we had the same mental health issues then. But there was one thing that was different, is that everybody seemed to cope. Now, you say, well, they had no choice. We have a bigger homeless problem than ever existed before. It's insane. I mean, you go to certain states, it's out of control. They don't have a choice. But in the 50s, people had massive trauma. Family rejected them, terrible stuff, molestation was happening at a crazy scale. There was not even education on it. It was terrible.
Are you referring to like in the United States?
In the United
community?
States. In the United States.
Just
I'm talking about like,
okay.
If we're going on they had no choice to survive and that's why they survived, then how do we have all these homeless people? They also have no choice, but they choose to live on the street because, not choosing, they do not have the ability to cope with those incredibly difficult emotions. What I am saying is that I can't change the trauma, but I could tell you, and this is fascinating studies that coming out of like third world countries, is that they have a tremendous amount of mental health issues. They have very little help for it. They don't have much therapy, but in terms of addiction, there's almost none. It's radically low on the addiction scales. I don't have the numbers with me right now, but in
third world countries?
In third world countries, addiction levels are very high. Depression is high, but that doesn't mean they don't go to work. They're going out there. So what I'm looking at Addiction to me means I don't have the ability to cope with this world. I don't have it emotionally, right? So what I'm saying is that it's not that was the answer. These people needed therapy. They needed work. They needed enlightenment. They needed all this stuff. But they didn't necessarily fall apart the same way. And I mean, the proof was in the pudding because the numbers were like people got up and worked. It was very rare to find somebody who did not get up and go out and try to get work.
And you attribute that to community.
And I'm attributing that to community. Can I tell you a fascinating story? I was traveling with my daughter. We went on a road trip in Israel. And I was going through the Negev desert. And we picked up a hitchhiker. Actually, we picked up two hitchhikers because they're the best conversations, and it's safe over there for that. So you pick up these hitchhikers, and the guy, I picked him up, and he says, I live in a anarchist kibbutz. So a kibbutz is a collective society, communism, but it's a special type of, there's only two in Israel where they don't believe in laws. So they just have one rule that everybody shares the money, but there's no government, there's no anything. Any money you make, from wherever you make it, you put it in the pot and you share it based on family size and all that. And it doesn't matter how much you make, how little you make, that's how it works. So I said to him, okay, well, let's say I got depressed for 2 years. I stayed in bed. So he thought about it. He said, yeah, you'd get the pot. There's no rule against that. And then I said, like, why did you think about that? Why did you stop and think? You've been living in this kibbutz. It's probably like a couple hundred people. Because no one does it. He says he's never heard about it. I'm like, no one has ever sat in bed for 2 years? Like, no one got so depressed it just sat in bed? I know 500 people like that today. He says, no, I'm sure people get depressed, but I don't know anybody who's staying in bed. They're living in a society where every person needs each other, the level of self-worth in that community. And I'm not talking... Believe me, someone in that community is getting molested. The numbers are out there. It's not possible that they're not getting trauma in these communities. It's happening. The thing is that I believe, and it's fascinating to look at the numbers, but the places where the entire community needs you and we hold each other and they need you and we need them, those are the places where people are making it through. They're having resilience. And that's what I'm looking for. And I think the beauty of today is that we have the ability of going past resilience. You hear what I'm saying?
I hear it. So there's no question that now there exists this opportunity, it seems, to kind of heal generational trauma, right? In other words, to heal what our parents and grandparents and great-grandparents could have never healed. So how do you explain that? Meaning if there was these healthy families, not families, but healthy communities where there was a lot of support, and you gave the example of a kibbutz, and maybe it wasn't called that 100 years ago, but there was that sense of, hey, we need you in the morning or we're not going to get the water for the rest of the town, and we're going to take care of you also when there's a death in the family or the birth of a child or anything else. Everyone knows everyone's business and everyone cares about everyone. So that exists there, but there wasn't this opportunity like there is today to truly heal. So what's going on now that's allowing for that?
We're not in survival mode. We have the ability to go to therapy and figure out our stuff and heal. I think I'm saying is that that's the beauty of today. The only thing is that we lost the baby with the bathwater.
Oh, got it. So you want to see if we can have both?
We have to have both. It's not going to go away. My solution is not let's go back and let's like drop an atomic bomb and make us all go back to agrarian society. Like, it's not my move. I'm not, it's not going to happen. And I hope it doesn't happen. That would be really horrible. And I wouldn't be into it.
Right. You're not trying to raise your family where they're pulling the water up from the well every morning.
Right.
So.
I'm not, but I can tell you there's a fascinating thing I saw. It was maybe in a documentary or something that they were having, that they kept bringing water to this village in Afghanistan. Like they were like teaching them how to have water, and somebody was sabotaging it, and they were trying to figure out who it was. I don't know if this was what this is from. And they found out the women in the village were sabotaging it. And they were saying, you bring the water to the village, the place where we go and talk is down by the well. We go collect our water. We got to wait till everybody gets it. We're schmoozing. This is where we get our news. This is where we talk. This is our mikvah. Mm-hmm. This is where we chill. And you're bringing the water. So they're trying to push back what, they see the consequences of all these beautiful things coming. Like, who doesn't want water right to their sink? They don't want water straight to their sink because they see this problem. We're so far from it, we forgot that there's a problem. I don't want to stop progress. Right. I think it's really awesome that we have it. The only thing is, how do we now combine both? That's why your original question made me so sad, because I don't think this is an addiction issue. I think this is way
It's a community
bigger.
issue, a loneliness issue.
It's a loneliness issue. It's a lack of support issue, which is what helps us have resilience. That's what gives us resilience, and our belief that we're worthy and special. How do we bring that back into a society like this? This is so meta, like it's so big that it's terrifying to me. So I'm working on a small level.
Right, but if you prove the model, then say, hey, can others do it as well? Can we start looking at addiction as a self-esteem issue, give people love and support, and then trust that they'll get back on their feet?
Right, if I could create a community of healthy people, like really healthy people, thriving people, out of the people who are suffering the most, I would hope the world would look at that and say, hey, that's a model that maybe we could recreate. Maybe we need to have little urban homesteads like that are happening in the middle. Maybe we have to come up with collectives during the day. Maybe like, I know Europe, like they hang on to like their siestas during the day. Like we all go have some coffee during the day. Like maybe we have to be very intentional about bringing back these strong communities. Maybe we have to figure out how to allow families to continue to live together. And I don't think that and when people lived together, it was all hunky-dory. There was toxic people in that
Sure,
community.
yes.
But you let that go because it was just part of the community. But you had 40 other people who were not toxic right next to you. Yeah, there was that aunt who was toxic, or that uncle, or that parent. But you can't get rid of that. I'm not trying to even get rid of that. As a matter of fact, if you really break it down, that is what makes our society better and better, is that we go through trials and tribulation and we improve. The problem is when we go through trials and tribulations and it crushes us, and then we don't improve. And that's what's happening. That's what I'm
Understood.
saying.
Okay, a couple of years ago, I believe you called me, said you were struggling with certain situations specific to sex addiction.
Right.
Right, that it was confounding you in ways that drug addiction, alcohol addiction were not. Am I remembering the conversation
I
correctly?
remember it very clearly.
Yeah. So what was going on, and is it still going on?
It's definitely still going on. You actually said something to me that I have thought about tremendously afterwards, and I've been incredibly grateful to you for, and have actually mentioned several times to people, and it was a very simple thing. And it's probably something I should have known in my own head, but I needed to hear it from someone else. And you were saying, and I'll go deeper, but I'm saying you said, addiction to substances is about a 1-year process to get rid of. And addiction to process addictions or sex addiction is about a 5-year process. So you need to be a lot more patient. And it just gave me...
I don't know that I have I don't remember having the reference for the substance as that being 1 year. But certainly
Right.
the process.
The process, you said 5 years. Maybe I added the 1 year. Because I do feel... so it really gets down to that substance addiction is kind of the easiest of the addictions. That's what I mean by that is that...
It is.
It's funny to say to people because, like, the greatest accomplishments of people is stopping substances, and I'm not knocking that. But I believe, and again, if we're looking at my model of how this works, is that if your self-esteem is really, really failing, your first attempt is going to be some form of codependency or people addiction. You're going to try to get validation from the people around you. That is the core of all addiction. How could I get these people to love me? And they mimic God. Like, I'm going to get these people to love me, but that's exhausting. So you try other things. Maybe you try buying them to love you. So maybe it becomes sexual. And then all these things are exhausting because they're very much out of control because they're other people. They're like, you can't control them. And when you discover substances, it's like a miracle because that you could control. it's a level of control. Like, I got this. So substances, getting rid of substances, all you have to do is like get rid of the substances and never touch those substances, and that could work. But to have, I need to figure out and manage
Having a healthy
something,
relationship.
a healthy
with something.
relationship with
That's
something
much
that I've turned so toxic, and is so much closer to the core of where we really are. So you find all the time with substance addicts, they take away the substances and they go, well, yeah, I'd like to go and have sex with people. Like, that's no problem. Well, I don't have that problem. That's the original problem.
Correct.
So when you get closer to the source, which is we desperately need each other's love, and you've used it in a very unhealthy way, that is incredible work to deal with. And that's,
I think it was, I sat with, I don't know if you know Divi Kamen.
yeah.
Yeah, so she explained it in an interesting way, is that our relationship, because she talks a lot about food addiction, eating disorders. And my experience with eating disorders, like sex addiction is tough, but eating disorders is kind of like the mother of all addictions,
Right.
from my experience. It just seems so hard for people to get their arms around it. And the way she explained it was that our relationship with food starts at a really young age. So the problem often has started at, it could be at a few months old. Someone can already start developing. At about 6 months, I think the brain starts making connections between cause and effect. So a small thing is, hey, I'm feeling uncomfortable, cold, whatever it is, and then saying, hey, a little bit of food can soothe that, and then developing an unhealthy relationship with food at a young age. And then if it's modeled by parents, by the time the kid is 2 or 3, they already have a full-blown unhealthy addiction with food, using
Right.
it to cope with emotional distress. And then sex comes online later on.
Right.
But you're not getting crack at 12, usually.
Right.
That's kind of happening later. So that comes online later. So she saw it as kind of the healing process, as where it got interrupted, kind of the age it got interrupted. I think there was someone else I spoke with who shared it more as a need, right? So if I have a need for food, a need for sex, a need for money, right? Those are actual needs that we have in the world, and then unhealthy relationships develop there. It's closer to our core than, say, alcohol, which is, it does feel like a need for an addict, but it's
Right.
not truly a need. You don't actually
really
need it to. You don't actually need it to survive. Regardless, I've seen people kick alcohol and drug addictions. Not easy, but I'm saying through sustained work, and just not being able to make a dent in sex addiction.
I've seen the same thing. I actually had a fascinating conversation with Faith Niece about this today, which actually, like, she middle of saying, I had like this amazing aha moment. It wasn't aha; she was just telling me something I didn't know, and because I say this thing that the amount of shame that's in the two most difficult addictions, in sex and food, is so odd to me. Because those are the one thing, like, you should feel ashamed that you use drugs. Like, why are you adding something you don't need into your life? But we're ashamed of the two things that sustain us as a society. Like, that, everybody does it. We
Right,
all
that which is
understand
most
it.
primal. Yeah.
Right, but it seems like it's the most shame, and shame is like you can't really recover with enormous amount of shame. I was telling her that you walk into a room with people in recovery, and you talk about this also, but you walk into a room, and if someone's a substance addict, like, they're almost like a vegan. Like, in 10 seconds, they're going to tell you how much recovery they got. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah, well, they're wearing the medallions on
right,
their
they're
neck.
like, it's the biggest pride. And you can know a sex addict for 20 years and have no idea he's a sex addict. He's not even going to tell good friends of his, or he won't tell, like, it's like the level of shame. And actually, what Faith said was that because it's so primal to our society, to human beings, that we need food and sex, that any type of perversion of that, even for many generations, was immediately punished by the community. You're not allowed to run around and just have sex wherever you want. There are rules. And these are things we need to sustain us as a people. I never heard this before. Food, you don't get to just eat all the food. We only have a certain amount of food. So it was like, this goes back, like she's saying, like thousands of years, where it's set, like, you don't mess with these two things.
If there was a distortion there, it affected everyone.
It affects the whole everybody.
Right. The town drunk
The town
He's almost
drunk is
cute.
like, yeah, what do I need? You're not taking anything.
He's a
from
joker
anybody.
right up until he gets violent. It's like a jester right up.
Right.
Yeah.
I never heard it said like that. I thought I don't know. Not that it answered anything and how to fix it so much, but it really helped me understand the shame. And I think that is probably the biggest issue is the level of shame is it's in order to really heal from something, you do have to yell it from the rooftops. You have to say like, this is my thing. And everybody around you, this is my thing. This is what I'm working on. If you can't say that, you literally always think, and again, back to my paradigm of how I see it, is that we have to change the belief in ourselves from I am unlovable to I am lovable. And if I hide a part of myself, I will always believe that the only reason you love me is because you don't know that.
Right.
But if you knew the monster that hides under my bed, that was a cool song. I don't know. If you knew this monster that hides under my bed, you're not going to love me. And the way I know that is because he's not telling you. If he knew that you'd still love him, he'd tell you.
He would say it. Yeah, it wouldn't be a secret.
Right. So how do you heal if you don't share it all? Because if you don't share it all, you can't allow people to love you.
Yeah, I had an incredible amount of shame around my sex addiction specifically. I was speaking for a while about sexual abuse, and I would throw in addiction, and I didn't specify, and I figured people assumed it was drugs or alcohol, and no one asked, and I just kept talking about it, and I said one of the consequences of being sexually abused was that I dealt with an addiction, and it wasn't until I realized that the shame was kind of ubiquitous, like everyone was dealing with it, that I needed to say something about it. One of the stories, I think one of the first times I actually spoke publicly about my sex addiction outside of the rooms of recovery was at the JRC, where, Mayor Kessler called me, and we were talking about different things, and he said, kind of the sex addicts who come to JRC, they're off in the corners hiding. We have our AA, our NA, our GA, those are well represented. He said, would you talk and share your story at the JRC? And I said, it's not going to be recorded on Shabbos. I'll do that. I mean, this is a few years ago, and now I'm all out with it. But one of the things that happened right before that, because I remember sharing the story at the JRC, maybe this is going back 5 years ago, was that there was a gentleman who started coming to our meetings for recovering sex addicts, and it was clear he had a lot of time in recovery. He had all the language down pat and everything else. As I got to know him, he was 20 plus years sober in AA, and he shared that although the meetings we went to, the same building had a number of different meetings, obviously AA overrepresented, and then some of the other sex meetings and gamblers and Al-Anon and so on. But he said for the first 3 to 6 months that he started going to sexual recovery meetings, he wouldn't come to our meeting because it was right next door to the AA meeting and all his AA buddies went to. So he was driving 30, 40 minutes out to go to a different meeting. Eventually he got enough support there or confidence to be able to not be afraid that his AA buddies would know he's going to a sexual recovery meeting. I'm like, this is nuts. You're around people who you profess to be this. I go to this group because I could be honest with them. These are the guys who I talk about the struggles in my life. And I don't want them to know, that I'm in recovery for sex addiction. I'm like, wow, this problem is huge. The shame around this is crazy. It took him 6 months, he was saying, to finally feel comfortable enough to say, not to tell them, but to not be afraid that they may see him sneaking in. He still wasn't comfortable.
Right.
I was like, wow, this is a big problem. We got to get ahead of it. And that's why I decided to. One of the things.
And I will tell you something that it's hard to admit, but the guys that have gone through my program, because this is the second variation of this program I had years ago. Unfortunately, my partner passed away, but we had a program similar to this. The guy, even from back then, the guys that were the most successful dealing with like sex addiction were the ones that decided, I'm just going to do AA. I'm just going to do it through Alcoholics Anonymous because I can't sit in those rooms. I just can't feel that level of shame. So like, I'm just going to tap into the fact that I was an alcoholic and I'll deal with it that way. And they actually became more functional. Now, I don't know if they ever, they do definitely have a lot of work to do.
Right around that.
But they were able to get some healing because the pain was just, it's like, how many times do I have to feel shame every single day? Because you could walk into any recovery meeting and feel shame of the people that are in there. The people that are successful in there are acting shamed. How am I going to, look up to that? I want to look up to someone who's proud of it.
Right. I think that depends on the group.
Yeah. I don't know that that's a scientific thing. I'm just telling you from some of the guys I've seen.
Yeah. One thing for sure, though, I mean, I was fortunate to meet a lot of people who were proud of their recovery. But one thing for sure is it's a program of slips. You will not go around a room of sex addicts and hear these 25 years, 20 years, 30 years like you hear in AA, where one guy after the next is picking up chips. If you see someone celebrating 2 or 3 years or 4 years, it's like dog years. Right. You should get 7 years for every year sober. The fact is that people will be sober for a long time and something may happen.
Right.
So they say that often. It's a program of slips, and this is not about figuring out how to get continuous sobriety forever, as much as if something happens, pick yourself up.
Right. I mean, I think the most important thing is, if you can, just blab about it. I don't know how to say it a better way. Like, if you can, because the fact that you're holding it in is ruining you. Like, I think that the most important thing, actually, when I originally started this, I didn't know much about sex addiction. And people would tell me, like, should I tell my wife? Should, disclosure, like, should I share it? I was like, I don't know if I want to ruin the relationship. I don't know if I didn't know enough about it. I'm like, if you don't talk about it, then it means you're feeling enormous amount of shame and you'll never feel lovable. That's how I see it now. Like, I don't want you going necessarily to everybody to talk about every problem. I don't think you have to tell everybody you're an alcoholic either. I don't think everything is for everybody. But the people who are close to you, who you're offering your heart to for vulnerability.
Yeah, they should know what's up.
They should know what's up. And
I'll go to disclosure in a second because I'm not totally agreeing. I want to say something.
Okay, yeah.
But
again,
yes.
I just think it's more because I'm still struggling with this. I believe that AA, has a pretty good model and it works for a certain amount of people, and it's a really easy thing to follow. And it's, if you do it, it pretty much works. It doesn't necessarily make you happy necessarily, and that's a different discussion. But, it usually works, and it's pretty, this is not so simple. And I haven't seen a program that I'm like, ooh, it's a program of slips. Who's really figured it out? But I'm using the way that I see it as, I don't see how you could ever change yourself from unlovable to lovable if you're holding it in. Now, what does that mean? Who do you tell? Who you don't? Again, it's different for every person, I think. Or maybe it's not. Again, I don't know so much. I will tell you I don't know so much, and that's why I had to call you, because it's so complicated that, and I read books, and I'm like, I don't think this is right. We're trying this stuff. These guys are going to the meetings. Some of the most devoted people I know going to meetings are suffering more than anybody.
Specifically with sex.
Yeah. Or eating.
Yeah. I mean,
I'm not getting into eating so
I don't
much,
usually... I don't publicly name the program that I was part of, just to respect anonymity.
Right.
But I have seen a lot of toxicity within SA itself, and for whatever reason, a lot of religious Jews gravitate towards SA. And I'd love to have someone sit down with me and defend this program. I hear the other side of it, but I've just
you got the wrong guy.
I've just seen so much toxicity from this program, and it feels to me like a religion that, like religious ideas that kind of got shoved, dogmatic religious ideas that somehow got shoved under the banner of 12 steps, which was meant to challenge dogma.
Right.
I can give you one example of these ideas. To say, in order to be considered sober, someone has to have sex within a marriage. What does that have to do with addiction? That's a religious principle.
That's religious.
So now you're giving some guy a standard. He says, okay, let's say he's really struggling in addiction. And they say, okay, in order for me to consider you sober, and apparently there's all sorts of hierarchy there, right? If you're not sober for long enough time, you can't talk, can't share, things that I don't think have crept into AA or NA, or certainly meetings that I've seen, where it's one day at a time, right? 12-step thing, one day at a time. We're all equal. We're sober today. We all start our chip count from we all start. Yes, we have a chip count, which is great, but we all start our count from this morning. We all start again, right? That's kind of the AA thing, one day at a time. That's the 12-step thing. In SA, what I've heard a lot of is these things. Oh, I have 10 years, I have 12 years. If you're not sober for 6 months, you can't qualify in a meeting, you can't cheer. There's all these stuff going on, which feels very much like hierarchy and things that I understood 12 steps was trying to do away with. But now you have someone who's struggling, let's say, with addiction to prostitutes, and comes into this recovery meeting, and they say, okay, you want to get sober? You can only be considered sober if you never have sex outside of a marriage. So now this guy has a standard that the average person walking down the street doesn't have to consider himself sober. You know, tell a guy who wants to be sober from alcohol that, okay, you want to be sober from alcohol? Don't have any sugar. Don't have any sugar, and then we'll consider you sober from alcohol. What does one have to do with the other? So to me, that's a very religious direction. So if someone's in a loving, committed relationship and they have sex, that's suddenly the same as sleeping with a prostitute? How is this similar? So to me, that's a religious idea that got shoved into 12-step programs. And what I've seen from it, the reason why I'm passionate about it, is that I just see a lot of pain from people who've been around those rooms for a while, and they're getting sobriety, and in that sense, it's helped some people, which is why they stay. It has helped them wean off some of their most destructive behaviors, but they're still left with, I don't know the word you use, but a lot of sadness or a lot of pain, or they're not happy.
Right.
I've seen, unfortunately, a lot of that. But in my own healing from
well,
sex
I will
addiction,
say that I see similar stuff. It's a little more subtle in AA and NA. That the best way I could describe it is like, there's the book, what it says in the book, and then there's the culture. And the culture is very different than the book. They say things that the book doesn't say. I mean, just take enabling, that everybody loves to yell off the rooftops. So enabling, stop enabling. Like, where in the book does it say enabling? You're supposed to be kind and offer compassion, and if a guy doesn't want it, you don't make him. Like, it says this stuff. Like, it doesn't say like you better like give him an ultimatum. There's no ultimatums in the book, but we're like throwing out this stuff. Even the idea, and this is something that's so incredibly sad that I've seen, is that people get this gorgeous community of this fellowship of AA or NA, and then they relapse, and then no one can talk to them anymore. So like all their safety, but that's not in the book. It's not in the book, but there are certain communities that have the culture that like now you're toxic, you're using. So all the people that loved you before and they were holding you and giving you this pseudo unconditional love just completely abandon you. I've dealt with hundreds of people like that don't want to walk back into the rooms because they're like, it's fake. And that's from the culture.
I experienced some of that when I got more and more into psychedelics for healing.
Right.
And it just seemed like that was not so welcome.
It's not so welcome at all. That was the amazing thing about this retreat we were just at, like that they were opening up a possibility of something.
Yeah, it's healing in different ways. And if not for plant medicines, my relationship, I was sober. I was sober almost 6 years. I think I had one relapse in 6 years. One slip in 6 years. Actually, I'll share this. I was going to share it earlier. So I had a sponsor who shared with me. He said, let's use the term slip and relapses. Okay, so slip is if you act out. Relapse is if you lose willingness to apply yourself to the program for any length of time. So slips are slips. They happen. This is a program of slips. And obviously don't go there with excuse, because we all know what happens. You feed the addiction and it gets stronger.
Right.
So we're not encouraging it. But when it happens, just pick yourself up, move forward, be gentle. If you're going to allow yourself if you're going to beat yourself up over that, you'll never get this program. Like, number one rule after don't act out is be gentle, ridiculously gentle with yourself. He said what we'll consider a relapse is where someone says, okay, like, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. I'm not coming to meetings. And maybe for 3 or 4 weeks they're out, they trip up in different ways and they say, okay, I'm back. So if you ever get a case of the efforts, the efforts?
Right.
If you ever get a case of the efforts, then that's a relapse.
That's a relapse.
But if...
I like this.
Yeah, 3 in the morning.
I never heard that before.
3 in the morning, you end up jerking off. Like, all right, just pick yourself back up and, come back the next day, come to a meeting. Don't get lost. So that distinction for me helped me a lot, where in recovery, that's one of the problems with the chip system and everything else is the case of the efforts, where someone says, I already slipped anyway, so I may as well get my money's worth.
Right.
I mean, what do you mean? It's a game?
And where in the
already
book
slipped.
does it talk about the chips?
The chip system, I have a big problem with the chip
It's
system.
a really rough one.
I have a big
I
problem.
know people that have long time in recovery and they don't share a slip because they don't want to lose their chip. They don't want
Yes.
they don't want to share it. I'm like, this is your community. These are your people that love you. Like, what does that stupid chip mean? I appreciate that if you feel pride, but can we say like you got 16 years in a slip? Like, can we do that? Like the way you said it, I like.
Yeah, one slip in 6 years.
Right.
Right. That was.
So your point was with the psychedelics, you were saying.
Oh, when I started talking, so the psychedelics helped me immensely, just absolutely immensely with my actual relationship with sexuality and healing in a more substantive and real way. Because the fact of the matter is that while I was sober, quote unquote, I was afraid of my own sexuality. And it wasn't until psychedelics that allowed me to heal that and said, no, this is not. I thought that I had, like, something got twisted up and I was done for.
Right.
Right. So I just always had to be on guard with my sexual desire. Otherwise it can overwhelm me. And the very first time I experienced psychedelics, I'm lying on the ground. Suddenly these like intense sexual fantasies come. And I'm like, no. I've been pushing out of my head for so many years. And here under the medicine, I couldn't resist. It's just too powerful. So after fighting for as long as I could, I said, you know what, to hell with it. Like, let me just swim in this fantasy. What's going to happen? I'm lying on the floor. I can't go anywhere. So I can't get in the car. I can't do anything. I couldn't even probably look at my phone and see, what the screen looked like.
Right.
So I'm like, all right, I'm just here. And it was the first time I was able to ride the wave of a sexual thought, sexual desire without getting overwhelmed by it and without trying to resist it. It was just kind of like surf it. And then it was over, and then I was on to the next thing. And as I processed that and as I healed more and more, I realized that, sexuality and intimacy always wanted to be kind of two sides of the same coin wound up together.
Right.
And maybe because of the abuse or because of cultural programming, those got split. And where I had intimacy, I didn't want sex. Where I had sex, I didn't want intimacy. But then through the use of psychedelics, it was like, no, this can be reintegrated. This is your natural state. Your natural state is for there to be a thread that's joined together, one called sex, one called intimacy. And where there is strong intimacy, right, there's that person who I'm most intimate with, I want there to be sex with. And that person who I'm having sex with, I want there to be true intimacy. Where most sex addicts will tell you they divide the two over time. Where when it's off the rails, a lot of wives aren't very happy with their husbands who are sex addicts.
Meaning when they're in recovery, or
No, meaning you would think at least
Right.
they're getting good sex.
right?
They're not.
Because there's no intimacy.
Because that's
Or
not
they're
where they want
separate.
their sex, because that's who they're intimate with,
Gotcha.
right? So it's like the sex
Like, I don't want to do that to my wife.
it's not even that. It could
Right.
be something,
Does it become like a dirty thing?
yeah.
I love my wife. I don't want to be dirty.
In
with
some
her.
ways, yes. In
Okay,
some
gotcha.
right. In some ways, sex takes on a dirty connotation. So like, let me do it with someone else. If someone's a shopaholic, their wife may be pretty happy with that. Right? So okay, at least I got a bunch of nice clothes. This guy loves spending money. It's not the same with the sex addict. Their wife is not usually not having amazing sex.
Right.
Right. Why? Because of that split. That where one has sex, they don't want there to be intimacy. Where one has, like, for me, it was so extreme. I didn't want to know the name of the other person I was with. Right. That was too intimate.
Right.
So over time, and the psychedelics showed me, was that these could, whatever was ruptured now could be restored, and I don't have to be afraid of my sexuality. And there was no amount of
And
12-step
when
meetings.
when you come out of it, and you're back in life, that those thoughts are just sticking with you.
Those aren't
Or do
thoughts.
you have to-
Those aren't thoughts.
it's
Those
a
are
belief.
visceral. Yeah, this is visceral today. I am not afraid of my sexuality.
Right.
And I was very. And there was no amount of meetings, not 1,000, not 10,000, not 100,000, that would have gotten me there. People say a journey is like 10,000 hours of therapy. No, it's not. Because 10,000 hours of therapy won't get you there. Won't get you there.
I know. I hear that.
Right? They're different.
I hear that. I am curious though, like, why can't they work together? I mean,
Yeah, they could.
I'm seeing that a lot of people that are getting into the medicine journeys are leaving the fellowships that they've been in the the 12-step fellowships that they've been in and saying, like, I don't really need that anymore. I'm seeing that a lot. I don't know. Can't they work together? Or
in
is there a
theory, they
split?
could. So certainly the 12 steps as an idea helps me immensely. And the amount of times I want to shake someone who's doing a bunch of ayahuasca and give him some of the language of the 12 steps and knowing how valuable that can be for integration. Like here, this wonderful fear that you identified in ayahuasca. Okay, have you ever made a fear list? Have you ever made a resentment list? Have you ever made amends to people? Have you ever done some of the work that the program pushes you to do? Have you ever sat there and challenged your beliefs of the world and tried to create a relationship with a higher power? Not under psychedelics, under everyday life. Have you tried to do that? So there's a lot of value, tons of tremendously valuable things in the 12 steps. I'm a huge believer till today of the 12 steps. The fellowship, I think, because entities want to self-preserve by definition. Once something gets created, it wants to preserve itself.
Right.
So there are a lot of ideas that stay with it. For example, my ideas are not heard by the people in the meetings, unless I listen to the podcast. But the person who left the meeting and is sharing this realization is not talking to the people in the meetings. So the newcomer who's coming to a meeting is hearing what? The old timer who's saying, you're going to be this way for 50 years.
They're not talking to people. I mean, they're not curious.
Who?
The old timers. You don't meet old timers that are curious?
A lot of them are dyed in the wool, right? This is their way. This is what's helped them.
Right.
This is their lifeline. And they're not, they'll hear what I'm saying and say, this guy's cruising for a relapse, right? They'll put any money down that I'm going to relapse.
I mean, it's interesting because
They'll say either he relapses or he wasn't a real addict.
Right.
Right? It's a religious belief in a lot of ways.
But I've seen them kind of embrace psychotropic drugs. Like they're into, they're not into the real old timers, maybe not. But I'm seeing people going 12-step meetings. I mean, almost everybody walking out of rehab is drugged up the wazoo on something.
Yes. Over time,
they're kind of allowing them in. I mean, the old days, I think they'd be like, "You're not allowed to come here with that."
Right, and I think that'll happen with psychedelics as well. Like as it's understood more and more, and it's already kind of happening in some circles, I'm sure.
Right.
I think there's a 12-step meeting for there is psychedelics in recovery meeting. It exists. Yeah, psychedelics in recovery. I think it's like PIR is the program.
Oh wow.
I don't know how big it is, how well attended. I don't know what addictions it deals with, but to me, they're very, very compatible. Right, because they're both deeply, deeply spiritual healing modalities, as opposed to a lot of therapy, which doesn't want to touch that. You can't really lean into 12 steps without adopting a spiritual worldview. You can't go through too many medicine journeys and not start touching the spiritual realms as well.
Right.
So to me, it's very compatible, but because, like I said, entities preserve themselves, certain ideas get. What I mean by that is that it's not going to be so popular to say, oh, I come to meetings for a little bit and then I'm good. But there may be tons of people walking out there who actually did that. It's not common knowledge. It's not commonly shared in meetings that, oh, you may need to do this for a little while and then you'll be on your own.
Right.
Because everyone who's there has continued to be there.
Right.
So that's what they're saying. So, you're probably going to need this your whole life. You know?
It's interesting that they're not looking at the statistics. The majority of people get off drugs without any treatment. I don't know if you know that. Now, I'm not saying, the 12-steppers, if you look it up, you'll see that it's a higher number. But the answer is they're not really addicts. That's how they answer.
From a 12-step perspective, From a 12-step
But there are other ways that have been working for a really long time. I haven't been in love with the 12 steps because it really encompasses a lot of what I believe you need to get better. And it's like as close, like there's, and Churchill says it about democracy. He says democracy is the worst form of government besides for all other forms of government.
Right.
So like to me, it's like when people tell me like a problem with AA or an NA, like I'm like, yeah, it's the worst. Besides for all the other ways, like
I love 12 steps. I love 12 steps.
I know I get that, but there is a dogma to it that is frustrating that I have, but I always wonder why everybody can't kind of embrace. Again, with me, like we talked in the beginning, I kind of toe the line between chaos and order. Like a part of me is like 12 steps, do the 12 steps, that works the best. And the other one is like, well, how do we fix the other people? Like, I am not cool with a 20% success rate. I'm not cool with a 5% success rate or whatever crazy low success rates. Like, you need to be curious. Like, my thought is, like, if you have a cancer ward and it has a 5% success rate, either close it down or do some research.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like that, it's a bad ward. You know, but to say like this is the answer, we only save 5% or 10% or 20%. Even if it's 30%, I would still do a lot of research. If it was 50%, I would do research.
Yeah, 100%.
We have people to help here. So I get very like frustrated by that. I also get very frustrated.
Yeah, I've shared that. I was interviewing a therapist a little while ago, and I think they used the word mental health expert, and I said I take issue with the term. I take issue with anyone even saying it exists, mental health expertise, because if it exists, then you got to explain to me all the people who are suffering.
Right.
Right. So, if there was an engineer who says I'm an expert on building bridges, and 80% of building, or any significant number, 20, 30% of bridges were collapsing, you say, okay, we don't really have expertise on building bridges.
Right.
Right. So some people know how to do it, but they're not experts. Because experts hit 99, 100%
Yeah.
rates. Like we would understand. We would
Well, no,
understand
this reason all the stuff we were talking about before, because I'm talking about like massive numbers of people are suffering. We have done more for the mental health world in the last 100 years than I mean, it's like it keeps increasing. I mean, the therapists in every form of therapy and every new idea, it's increasing. And it's like the war on terrorism. We're losing. You know what I'm saying?
Right, the war on drugs.
It's the war on drugs. We lost. We're not winning this war, and I want to know the answers. And okay, we have some answers, but this is now our pursuit. This is our pursuit. That's where I am. Like you asked that one question. It terrifies me. Like, okay, this thing is leaking too fast.
I'll share a thought though. So I had this thought recently. Actually, it's a combination of that I've been processing for a little bit. But we live at a time of incredible freedom. Like you shared earlier, that people didn't move 50 miles from their house. It wasn't even that. It was people went into the trade that their father was into. Is like their grandfather. If their grandfather was the town rabbi, their father was, and so were they. If the grandfather was the water carrier, the father was, and so were they. If the grandfather was a baker, their father was, and so were. Like this was, your life was pretty much set from when this guy was born. This is who he's going to marry. This is going to be his profession. This is where he's going to live. You know, all was set out already. And now we have just incredible freedom. You don't even know that you're going to live in New York for the next 5 years with any like real level of certainty. Right?
If I would work the numbers, it'd be pretty low.
Right.
I wouldn't know. Yes.
Right. If I end up in Florida.
I mean, I've been here 2 days too long. That's the problem. This place is very attractive. Okay.
Right. But what I'm saying is that we have an incredible amount of choices. And then add to the fact that just like the whole world's at our fingertips. We can fly anywhere. We can move anywhere. There's a lot of freedom there. We also have a lot of freedom of time. We do. Much more so than any other society. Even though we all feel very busy, practically in order to get our needs met, we can spend a lot less time than our fathers did and than our grandfathers did. There's just a lot of easy access to that. So because of this, and then I think add to that there's kind of no leadership. There's almost none, right? There's none in America. There's no real, like, presidents are barely looked up to. In the Jewish world, there's like the Gadol Hadar, whoever those aren't, you know, there isn't that
Right.
leader. So we have a lot more freedom. And with that comes the capacity to self-destruct or the capacity to heal generational trauma. Like we can, the paths are much wider than before. So in those societies where you weren't going to move much out of your great-grandfather's profession, you also weren't going to turn into a drunk.
Right.
Unless your grandfather was a town drunk.
Right.
Right. You weren't going to turn into a drunk. But today, the the possibilities are so huge that yes, there's massive risk, and we're seeing that, but there's also tremendous opportunity. You know, people rag on the rich all the time. Most people in America who are rich were not born rich.
Right.
So we'll see if that continues, if that trend continues, and it seems to be, you know, the price of freedom is responsibility. And will we be responsible with that freedom? Will we make good choices? That's really the question. But I think overall, the state is a very hopeful state. It's not a doomsday scenario. It's like, no, we've been given incredible freedom, and some of us are unfortunately making super bad choices. But if we can get more of that message out that, no, if you harness that freedom, you can create more than you imagined possible. Right? 2 generations ago, them harnessing their freedom, what were they going to do? Today, some guy can tap into a hidden talent, and the whole world can know about it within a few years.
Yeah. You could change your profession at 45 and like just become a new person to the world. Warren Buffett, it didn't change his profession, but he made most of his money after 50. I like that.
Yeah.
But that's the thing, is that when I talk, sometimes there's a little doom and gloom, so I try to stay away from that idea because I freaking love the world. I was talking to you about, before we came on, about going on an RV trip with my kids, I can't believe I could do that. It's a wacky thing, and we do it. I can't believe that I could pick up and go to Israel for the summer, and these things were unheard of. People would walk over mountains to get to Israel because they wanted to get to the homeland. Insane stories. I'm so happy with what we got. I just think we evolved faster than we don't know what to do with it. And what I'm saying is there was a lot of, not everything old was bad. So that's what I'm trying to say.
No, and this is great. And pulling back some of those things are.
That's what I'm trying to say is I don't want to give up any of this. I'm not willing to give up anything. And as a matter of fact, I'm not even willing to give up, if I want to spend 7 hours on my phone playing fishdom, it's none of your business. I like that. I have the freedom to do that. But how do I end up functioning in this world in a way that I'm proud of, and that I love myself and I love my kids, and I could have good lives, and I don't have to live on the street, and I don't have to be desperate all day long? And how could we do that? I want to take the wisdom of the old and kind of the adventure of the young and marry them. I'm trying to do that, and I wish I want to fix everything. I want to be Elon Musk and tackle this issue we're gonna fix everything. We're gonna go to Mars. You know what I'm saying? It's gonna be all better. That's the feeling. So I feel like a very hopeful person, especially because I'm watching something happen without too much work. It's working. So I'm okay, maybe this could spread. And if it wasn't better, no one's going to do it. I brought up Elon Musk. You couldn't just make an electric car. It has to be better than the gas cars.
Right, 100%.
No one's going to change it unless it's better. If we come into my sober living and it's a drab, disgusting place, and I say, don't worry, it's a different model, and you're not going to enjoy it, but it'll work, no one's doing it. But if I can make this...
And even if your results are 10% better, no one's going to be intrigued.
Yeah, it's not intriguing.
Right, you got to blow
And
it out
Elon
of the
Musk made a car that is better in every single way than every gas car was terrified that you had to up their game 1 million times because this dumb car company is all of a sudden better than all of them. That's how we make change. It has to come from a place of delight. It has to come from a place of joy and okay, we're doing something beautiful. It should not come from this hard, depressed idea. But when I think about the fact of all the people suffering, and I'm if they would have thought of us suffering, I don't think anybody could conceive of it. That I'm saying 200 years ago, you're suffering, you all eat, you all sleep in a nice bed, and when your bed gets a little lumpy, you just get a new one from Amazon. It shows up the next day. If you don't like Amazon, you get it from whatever store you want. What I'm saying is we are living the greatest thing, and I want everybody to gather together and say, how could we turn this also into a place where we could survive, we could thrive, and we could go into places. You talk about ayahuasca. I don't want to just stay as someone who's surviving. I want I want to touch the divine. I want to get somewhere beyond. We have the ability to do that today. And most people are sitting on their phones 11 hours a day.
Yeah, there are certainly those, right. There are
You know what I'm
certainly those
saying?
stories. And that's what happens with that freedom of time. It's like you can use your time in incredibly powerful ways and things that, for example, right, this conversation happening 100 years ago could have limited effect. But now, realistically, every single person in the world could hear it. Right? There's the potential. It will be available to pretty much every single person with an iPhone or an Android phone, which is most of the world.
That'd be so cool if
right,
that happened.
To be able to hear it, meaning that's a possibility. Some guy with a good voice could be known by the whole world in a couple of years, and before you had to find the agent with the publishing house, with whatever was needed. So the possibility, the choices are wild. One of the things, for example, we sat this morning in a workshop, right? You joined a workshop led by Mayor K.
Wild.
And the Adama, we put on like a mini Adama over there. And Mayor and I were both attending the retreat a few years ago as addicts who were suffering and needing help. Mayor, 3 years ago, did his first breath work at the JRC retreat. And that, to me, is what's truly inspiring, is that a lot of these guys who feel like they're walking around in the dark, a few tweaks, and these guys are suddenly helping a ton of people.
I'm seeing these. To me, these are miracles, but it seems obvious to me that that's going to happen. When I think, there was a fascinating thing I was seeing at this retreat that, like, in terms of community, is that the only place you see, and this is what kept striking me, is the only place I've ever seen a Jewish community is in recovery. And what I mean by that is, like, there is a lot I could go, and there's a lot of open-minded communities, and in Crown Heights you have a beautiful Chabad community, and in Williamsburg you got the Satmar community, but none of them are Jewish. They're a sect of Judaism. But because of these highly sensitive people that have suffered in a certain way, they've all come together in a room. You have people that have no connection to Judaism religiously, and people that are ultra-Orthodox from Lakewood or Williamsburg, and they're all in the same room, like, absolutely loving each other. And I'm like, this is the only Jewish community I've ever seen. This is a Jewish community. Do you tell me you have a Jewish community, but
a
no
Jewish
Reform
community as
people
opposed
exist?
to a Chabad community? Or
Yeah.
right.
You
Okay.
tell me there's a Jewish community, but the majority of Jews, which are Reform in America, are not part of that conversation. Like, it doesn't, like, compute in my brain. I mean, I was raised with those ideas to think that makes sense, but it doesn't make sense. So, like, when I see this and it's everybody, I have such hope that I'm like, we could all get together and do, like, amazing, amazing things. And I think it's going to come from the people who are at the bottom. Meaning, like, to me, that makes sense. Like, we have all these stories in the Torah of, like, great leaders. Every one of their stories start at the bottom. They all do. Like, you talk about sex issues. Yehuda and Tamar was not a good situation. Like, she was a prostitute or acting like one. And, we get Mashiach from that. Like, that's how it works. And I think it comes from this feeling of, like, someone who's at the bottom feels that they could change the world. Because I think there's a thing that, like, every addict has that's a little, again, back to the baby, is that every addict I meet says, and it's almost babyish, kids say it, like, it's not fair. It's not fair, this experience. I had this is not fair. And every adult says to a kid, well, life isn't fair. But an addict is like, that's not acceptable to me. Like, I need it to make sense. You can't punish me for nothing. This person's not allowed to hurt me. It doesn't. So there are certain people that get, like, that get the same trauma as an addict. The difference is the addict is like, I don't accept that.
Right.
So
there's oftentimes a relentless fight for justice.
Right.
Within the addict.
So those are going to be the people that change the world. I'm saying is, to me, that's the community that's going to change the world. And I feel like I'm part of it. and it's funny because I don't really even identify as an addict, but I feel like I'm so deeply in, and most people just think I'm in recovery, and I'm not. And that's very wild. I'm 26 years working with addicts, and that's just 30 years I've been surrounded by addicts, and everybody just assumes. And I just want to be part of the club. Like, I also feel it's unfair. I want to be part of this. I'm also a baby. I want the world to change. I don't like what's happening. I think that's the beauty, and I want and like I get a choice. I could be with a group of people who like live their lives. Or I could be with people that every year they're a completely transformed person. That's the recovery community. Like if the world looks at them, they're like, oh, that could happen.
Yeah, and then to start giving back. And one of the things hopefully the AA gods don't come after me for it.
They're coming. They're coming, bro.
But kind of the anonymity, I think, was taken too far. I understand the anonymity of the program, right? They didn't want someone to say, hey, I am the face of AA, because then there they go, relapse, and AA was held up by this person, so now it gets dragged down by this person, right? So they don't want anyone to have that. But what it became for many addicts is not actually sharing their story publicly. It's not speaking about things openly. It's like, oh, we're anonymous. Okay, so figure out how to be quasi-anonymous. The way I pay homage to that is by not saying the name of the program that I went to. Okay, right. It was some 12-step sex addiction program. If I relapse tomorrow, you can think the other program was the one I went to, and right, and go to the one I like. I'm not dragging down any program if, as recognizing that ideal, but for a long time those ideas stopped me from sharing my story, stopped me from speaking out. I was asking my sponsor, is this okay with 12 steps? It's like, come on, like, could this help the world? Like, why are we asking the wrong questions? Could this help the world? And if it could, let's do it, and let's figure out a way to do it. The Jewish way is to find heterim for things that are important to do. So we'll find a heter. We got this.
Well, if those original people didn't want to share it, they wouldn't have put it in a book.
That's what's interesting. It's kind of interesting.
It's out there. Anybody can buy that book.
Right. But they say like Bill W. and Dr. Bob, but we all know his name was Bill Wilson. We know exactly who it is. We know his life story.
Right.
We know Bob's story, right? Yeah, yes. There's something nice about the anonymity. It's not meaningless, and it is a principle of the 12 steps and did hold them together in ways. AA has never turned into a business. AA doesn't own real estate. There are a lot of things that it didn't become a nonprofit where there was a rabbi and a board, which were fundraising a bunch of money. So there's tremendous things about the 12 steps, and these principles help to preserve it. There's the 12 steps and the 12 principles.
Right.
And principles help to preserve the steps, and these are some of them, right? The principle of anonymity.
And it didn't become corrupt.
Right, it didn't.
I mean, some people have ideas that may have like grown out of like weird
Sure, but
ideas,
it's not. No one's making millions off.
No
it.
one's making anything, which is beautiful.
Right, and it's the principles that safeguarded it. So I'm not throwing all the principles out, but I think that in some ways we took it a little bit too far. It's like you're saying, like, addicts do have the ability to change the world, but if so many of us are getting sober through 12 steps and we're taking this idea of anonymity just a little bit too far, in my opinion, but just, okay, we can't share, we can't speak, we can only talk amongst our fellowship, then how are we going to change the world?
I don't know, but I think they can. I don't know.
So we got to push. I'm pushing up
we're
against
Jews.
it.
We could get around the principles.
That's what I'm saying. I push up against that anonymity piece and find a way to continue to share my story. And like I said, pay homage in some way and recognize that the anonymity exists, but not hold myself back from sharing my story and hopefully having the impact that I could on the world. Question for you, because we touched on psychedelics. Your thoughts on it?
So very interesting. I have some experiences with it. If you want to know about that, I'll tell you. But
personal experiences. Drinking from the what is it? Eating from the forbidden fruits.
Eating from the forbidden fruits. First of all, I will say that I'm not promoting it. I have to say that. It's not. I'm a curious person, and I'm open to everything. Like we talked about, you can't. like if it's 30% or 40%, I still want to know all the percents. And if some of those things are going to be wrong, I still want to venture into those areas. I could say that I have vacillated with my thoughts on it back and forth in many ways. In the beginning, I kind of had like, what are you doing? Like that was kind of my, like, do the 12 steps. Let's, like, go to therapy. Like, just like, okay, like, stop it. That was kind of, and I didn't have it. And a friend of mine who is somebody I helped in recovery and had, bring his life back together from a long, long time ago, and we became very, very close friends, became a shaman. And we've had years and years of conversations about it, to the point where I couldn't resist anymore. Like I couldn't, like I had to know for myself. And this is over a decade ago, but I had drank from the forbidden fruit, from the ayahuasca, right? And the experience was incredibly, incredibly painful. And also the most wonderful, like the most wonderful thing that happened to me till that date, in terms of an experience, not like better than my children being born or my obviously getting married and stuff, like not in that level, but I'm saying in terms of a self-realization, understanding of where I need to go from here. I did have that idea, this is 50 therapy sessions, but I do understand what you're saying, that I don't think 50 therapy sessions would have got there.
Right.
But the elation I get in a therapy session when I like have a breakthrough, it was about 50 of those.
Yes.
So like it hit me, and where I thought it was going to go, it didn't go. It did not follow my rules. I went to war with it in that experience, like for hours. It was back and forth, like 2 hours. It was just like a fight. I was not willing to, similar to the Adama hour that you did this morning, where I was like, please don't call on me. I'm not doing this vulnerability thing. So I was trying to be open, but there was a big war. And it opened me up to a place where I don't think, it dropped down all the guards that I had and showed me what my next move was, like where I have to go, and that everything else was kind of like negligible. Like you don't need to deal with that. Like the things you thought you need to deal with, it wasn't really that important.
It was a one and done for you?
So I did that time, and then I never really planned on doing it again. But it gave me a very, very like big homework, and it was rough, and I had to do that homework, and I didn't get the feeling like I got to go back. It was like, here's the thing, go do it, and then I spent 8 years doing that. And I went off the path a couple times, but it always was in my head, like it didn't go away. Like, this is the mission, go for that. And it was wonderful. It was painful but wonderful to do that, and I got places.
I heard someone say, it was the worst night of my life, I can't wait to do it again.
Right.
And I thought that was the best description of ayahuasca.
That is a good description, but I will say that I never wanted to do it again. I got it. It was great. But then for some reason, it was a kind of against my will, I went again. And that's a hard way to explain. I can't give all the details because part of it's not my story to tell. So, but I ended up once again at it, and it was double as hard as the first one. It was just so incredibly painful, and it was hell. I mean, the experience was. I actually lived many years in the experience.
That's rough.
Which was, and everything I owned and everything I had and all my family and everything was ripped away from me. They all died and disappeared and abandoned me, and it was like this ego death. Like I was like, just stop already. I ended up in a psych ward with like nothing left. Years after the ayahuasca experience, like I was already locked up, and it all happened because of ayahuasca. And then I had this one I haven't really shared with people, but like, I had this experience, and my wife was the only one still there, and she pulled me out. She's like, we need you back. And then that was my birth experience. And it was just I mean, a lot of ayahuasca people kind of understand this. Like everything had to be taken away till it was all brought back. And it was wonderful, and it was really special. And the experience I had, and this one is more recent, it's a couple years ago, but this one had amazing effects, but I will say that it's still really painful till today. And I'll tell you, because my experience was, first of all, very fascinating. Someone asked me, was this similar to your first experience? And ayahuasca did not allow me to remember my first experience. It was like, that one's done. I couldn't remember it. It took me
Still
like,
can't remember it? Or
no. It took me like about a month to like remember most of the first one, even though it was the most impactful day of my life until the second one. I just couldn't, like, I was like, what happened there? I couldn't really get it. The second one gave me this feeling, which, like, how do you get this from therapy? But like, it gave me this feeling that not only am I hard to love, but I'm like a helium balloon. Like, like anybody who decides to hop on my love train is like the luckiest person in the world. Like, it was the opposite of like, I'm unlovable. It was like, hop on board. This is going to be a really fun ride if you love me. And this was the challenge. This is what I had to work on. The problem after that, and this was, maybe you could help me with this, but the problem after that is that everything hurts now.
Meaning?
When, like, in my life, I've always assumed that no one's going to love me. So if someone was mean to me, I came up with a good reason why they're mean to me. And, like, it made sense to me. And I always made it make sense. I saw the bigger picture. And I was actually a pretty pleasant person to be around because you could do whatever you want to me. And I'm, like, pretty good. Super codependent, like, dealing with that. The last, let's say, 2 years or so, people will say something to me that doesn't feel loving or feels like they stepped over a boundary or, like, and I will viscerally, like, feel the pain, because there's a confusion, like, why you're not hopping onto the helium balloon. So over the past years, like, one of fascinating word that's been happening, I just will, like, someone will say something to me and I'll just go, ouch, and look at them. It's not even like, and it's not because I'm trying to be snide or like, but like, I don't have another word for it. Like, this is an experience that I never had before. Like, so a lot of wonderful things came out, and I would never trade it in for anything. I would never trade it in because I'm literally able to allow people to love me in ways that I've never experienced before, and demand love in ways that I've never experienced before, and demand respect in ways that I've never experienced before. But I'm so raw, like a little child who, like, why don't you love me? Like a Rebbe comes over to you, does something mean to you. It hurts when you're little, and then you forget it hurts. Right. But now it hurts.
So you're asking for help with it?
Yeah, I would like some help, but I have no desire to go back.
Right. So how do you understand when you say allowing someone to love you? What does that mean?
Well, I think that before I had a belief that I'm not lovable. So therefore, if you try to love me, then you're lying to me. So I have to protect myself from you. And I will just assume that something I did wonderful allowed you to be nice to me.
So if someone didn't have the ability to love you,
they can't love me because
right,
there's something
previously,
unlovable.
They didn't, but that was a protection, right? They didn't have the ability to love you, and they didn't have the ability to hurt you.
Right. Yeah, no,
Right.
I'm not going to let them hurt me.
Okay, so now, when you
Now
say
they
this-
can love me, but
now
they
they
can
can
also
hurt you too.
me.
That's why ouch.
Right. That's the ouch.
That's the ouch.
And I'm just not used to it. But I'm
Right.
so happy I have it.
Because
it-
they go hand in hand.
Right. But it really hurts. But
But you really feel love.
I really feel love. It's weird to me. Like, two friends of mine for Purim just got me. They rented me a throne for my Pesach Seder. Literally a massive throne, and it was delivered to my house. Just like an outpouring of love. They weren't even coming for Pesach. They said, "You're a king. We love you." Two friends of mine sent over this throne. I don't know what it cost or not, but it was, in terms of like just a friend doing something like that. And the only experience was like, this is really weird. Like, this is really weird. But I was able to accept it, but it was, my wife took a video of it, like, to show them. And I'm like, this is really weird. I'm like all tight. I'm like trying to get, but I think that there's been a message to the world, like, I'm allowing love now. Like, you could give love.
Right, and they go hand in hand.
Right, but then the other people who are used to the old Sonny, like, they'll just say a mean thing to me. And I'm like the easiest guy to get along with. Like, no problem. And all of a sudden
I was
now,
thinking that just before we started talking that I don't know that I've ever heard, no one I've spoken to has ever said something not nice about you.
no,
It's probably, I never heard one not nice thing about you.
I'm the nicest guy. I have made a profession of codependency. It's a profession. In the last year, people have have had some hard time with me because I don't necessarily try to patch up every situation. I'm like,
So all I'll say is this. I mean, I don't know if you followed the answer, but when you open yourself up to love, you open yourself up to hurt, so it makes
Right.
sense. But I've come out of ayahuasca ceremonies like really, really angry.
oh wow,
Really angry. And just all the places where I wasn't putting my foot down, I had to. And for a while I was joking that I've done ayahuasca, I don't know, over 20 times at this point, but I was like, ayahuasca gave me 1/4 of one testicle back. And I say it gave me 1/2 of one testicle back. You know, it's like slowly it's allowing me to step into that. And part of it was like waking up an anger inside me and say like, no, this is not okay. That treatment is not okay. Stand up for it. Those boundaries are being crossed. Stand up, stand up for yourself. Stand up for the situation, etc. So it's normal for ayahuasca to fire us up. It's like a mama who wants to protect its kid,
Right.
And say like,
I actually
no,
discovered years
don't
ago
let the
that I love anger. It's the greatest thing. It's the only emotion that just not going to take bullshit. Like, I'm sorry, you're too special for this guy to step on you. No matter how sick I was, every once in a while there'd be anger, and anger would be like, you gonna let him do that to you? You're the best thing ever. You're amazing. This guy cannot cut you off. It's your internal pep talk. And I'm like, we're trying to push that away? Every other emotion's telling me, like, sit down, you suck,
Right.
there's no hope, And
Right,
this
this
guy's
one
like,
fires
stand up. Now, you shouldn't punch anybody in the face, but scream. But, like, hey, I deserve to be respected. So I getting in touch with that a little bit as well.
Yeah,
But there's a lot of hurt. It's been a lot of hurt. So, I mean, that's my personal experience. So it's really hard to ignore my personal experience in this story. But I could tell you that I'm having a really hard time watching people going back and back and back and back to ayahuasca or to other things. And it's almost like become a whole new community of like, oh, we're going to try this, and then we're going to do Buffon, we're going to do this, and then Ibogaine, and it's like chasing something that it seems to me that, yes, it's not addictive, but I have this thing I call it Rebbe-itis. Like there's the idea that like someone's gonna come and save us, and like there's an answer. It's like there, and if we just grab it, that's our answer. And like I think it's the downfall of a lot of people. It's like there is no answer. This is a journey that we're going through. There's gonna be answers along the way, but I keep seeing people walking out feeling like they got insights that were amazing, and they felt the feelings that were amazing, and they just keep going back. And I'm watching them not really grow.
Okay, so I was going to ask you, is the issue
Right.
they keep going back, or that you're not seeing positive?
I'm not seeing positive,
change?
but if you ask them, they're killing it. You know what I'm saying? I have this joke. Let's see if you like this. But I want to make an app, and the app is for all the people that think they're like super enlightened from all this stuff. That it sends a survey to 10 of your closest friends, like your most common contacts, and they get to decide if you change. They're like, nah, he's still mean to his wife, and he still is like, he didn't change so much. It's a funny app. I'm not gonna make it, but it's like everybody who's doing it is like, I've made it, and some people have. And to me, it's like, if you're gonna do this ceremonially once a year, maybe once every twice a year, I haven't figured out a number yet, but like, when it becomes, I keep going back to it, it smells a lot like the methadone maintenance program. It smells like that to me. So
Right. So I hear a lot about
Right.
this person. I don't know anyone who's been trapped in that for too long, personally.
So I
I've
hope
seen-
I'm wrong about that, but I have seen people be
Right.
stabbed.
What I've seen is there's kind of this kind of fall in love at first for a lot of people.
Right.
It's like, wow, I've never experienced anything like this, and then eventually it becomes we become kind of less mesmerized by it, and we see it for what it is. It's not a panacea. It doesn't solve all of our problems. It doesn't give us information on everything. We didn't become prophets. It can sometimes, if we're not careful, it can lead us down a wrong path. I've seen bad relationships come up in ceremonies where people think they're in love with someone that was nothing more than being incredibly vulnerable and open, and so was someone else. And then it feels, they have the love that could normally only be developed over many years.
Right.
But it's not actually developed over many years. So it withers and dies or creates problems. So, but over time that I've found with people that I've seen kind of go sideways with it, that it self-corrects. Eventually, there's a journey which shakes them up, and saying,
Right.
"What the F are you doing?"
I have seen that as well.
Yeah.
But I am seeing a lot of people that are weekend warriors. I'm not gonna call them anything else, but they're like, it's just constant, and
I hear about these people. I don't know any of them.
right. Okay.
Yeah, I'd love to.
I will say that maybe I'm way too steeped into this, not because this is my community. It's just a lot of friends of mine are very deeply in this. Like I know hundreds of people that are doing this, and I'm trying to watch it with a curiosity because I'm like, something is incredibly beautiful here, and I know that from my own personal experience, and I know that from watching other people as well. But I do have a cynicism. Also, another part of the cynicism is that this is not the first psychedelic revolution. Meaning,
100%.
And the children of the people from the 60s, some of the most narcissistic people came out of the 60s. And we like the 60s because it's good music and some good clothing and stuff. And the hippies were kind of cool. But if you speak to the kids of the hippies, this is a big mess. And a lot of these people were super enlightened. And they were like going to India and being enlightened. And their kids, it didn't really heal the way, and
I think there's a difference, though.
Right.
I think so. I think that, from my understanding of
Right,
it back then, people were going for enlightenment. They were searching for that, and now most people I know who are entering the world they're in desperate need of healing.
yes, it could be different. And what I'm
But I
saying
agree
is
with
that
you.
I'm sitting. I feel like even though I've been a little bit in it, and obviously I'm a newbie compared to the real the real people, in some sense. Not newbie in terms of I probably did it before most people in the Orthodox community in terms of time, but if you have 10 years in between, it's not like I'm not a professional at this, but I am watching it, and I'm watching it with as much of an open mind as I can, and definitely my cynicism is up there. I'm like, I would like to see where this goes, because I know people that have maybe they deserve to get divorced, but like it told them get divorced afterwards, and like marriages ended. It's not. I don't think it's from the psychedelics, but I think that a lot of people are making a lot of decisions based on something that and there doesn't seem to be like. I would be a lot happier if it was married to the 12-step program, in the sense where like, okay, now do some real work on yourself. Like take that enlightenment and do the 40 years of the desert.
Okay, so this I've
where you
seen.
do the work.
I've seen some funky decisions.
Right.
I got to quit my job. It's like, chill out.
Right,
There's no way this makes sense right now. And even if that was the message isn't to do it in a ridiculously abrupt way and hurt a bunch of people,
Right.
Maybe saying you're miserable in your job. Okay, so now that you've landed back in the real world, figure out how to land the plane, and it may be a 2-3 year process.
Right.
Like you said, there's certain messages you can take for a long time. There's no question these are incredibly powerful substances and tools that we need to learn how to navigate properly. Some of what you said about people looking at your program and holding it to kind of a ridiculously high standard,
Right.
and saying, "Oh, you're gonna kind of turn the head on addiction recovery," then I wanted to have 400% better results.
Yes.
So some people are asking that of these medicines too. They're not that way. But that being said, in terms of your stories about it, if you've had kind of two back-to-back, if we were talking privately, I would say, if you had kind of like two back-to-back, incredibly difficult experience, sometimes what's happening there is a lot of resistance to it.
Yeah, 100%.
Like a tremendous amount of resistance. And when you resist these medicines, it's hell on earth.
Yeah.
What I've found, and I don't want to say, okay, like this is it, because I've had some very, very, very difficult journeys, like some legendarily difficult journeys, ones that were obvious to everyone in the room that it was a difficult journey. But as I've kind of traveled more in that world, I've found that the difficult periods are often a few good breaths away from resolving, meaning just surrendering into that, and then the next thing can come from it. And if we don't, we can be fighting up against it for a long time and get very difficult messages, which is what we need. Meaning if we don't know how to do that, then that's what it's teaching us how to do. It's teaching us to surrender. It's teaching us to relax and let go and be able to pay attention,
Right.
and to, and to hear a different voice and to be open to a different perspective, which is a lot of what these medicines help us do, is just see things in a different way. And some people take that as a rigid way, but I often see it as, okay, here's another possibility, another possibility. Can you look at life just a little bit, like with a little bit less rigidity? Like maybe this is true, maybe that's true.
I mean, I do believe that, and it definitely came out on the Adama thing that you did this morning, where I was like just really not wanting to get that vulnerable with a new group.
So what you keep saying that? What do you mean? What?
Well, I feel like my whole life I have been holding I've been holding myself back. I've built really very powerful walls, and they've done wonderful things for me. And I'm slowly trying to let them down.
But how does this jive with all the healing you're doing and trying to offer it to others? And
it jives with it because we do the things that we know we need. There's a reason I'm the guy who's the most passionate about giving community. I can't.
But
even
at what
get a
time does it
community.
get turned inward? And
I'm trying. Well, I'm saying I'm trying. I went to that group.
right.
So I am trying. I did ayahuasca. I did combo. I've done a lot of therapy. I'm trying. I don't want to be the person who's like, I work on myself the most, but believe me, I try, and I have discussions and with everybody, I'm trying. I will say I'm trying.
Right.
But the levels of resistance are incredibly high.
Right. Meaning you do have strong walls. You have a lot of ego
So
defenses.
ayahuasca does break through. The first time it was actually in a compassionate way, because I fought it for 2 hours, and I'm like, F you, I'm not doing what you say, and I'm done. Like, I wanted the answers, now I don't want it. Like, you do your own thing. If you can't come up with another way to be nice to me, I'm not taking your answers. That was the first time. It was a whole discussion, because it wanted me to pee in my pants, just to let you know. Like, in middle of the living room. Like, I was in a living room. And I'm like, and it kept telling us. I kept going to the bathroom. It's like, no, not in the bathroom, here. And I'm like, and I tried, and then I was like, no, I'm not doing it. Like, it was very symbolic, and eventually I was like, okay. And then it says, fine, you can lie down. I'll give you the answers another way. And then it was like, actually.
What's it? Eventually you said okay, and then what?
No, it said okay. I was just like, F you, I'm done.
Oh, it gave in.
It gave in.
Or you gave in.
No, I didn't give in. I just said, I tried. I can't. I'm not strong enough. If you want to give me the answers another way, I'll take it, but I'm not. Because it was like, you get the answers, but you need to pee in your pants. And it was for 2 hours I sat there doing, to the point where they were so angry at me in the ceremony because I was taking over the bathroom. Because I kept going to the bathroom, and they're like, "Why are you going?" I'm like, "I don't even need to go. I just don't want to be on the floor, And so so it eventually like gave me another way. I lied down. I saw it in a dream. It was very wonderful, and but it was hours of fighting. And the second time, it was similar. I recognized my resistance. The second time, I said, "F you," because it started with the terror, and I'm like, why don't I get rainbows and butterflies like everybody? I literally was yelling. I was like, I want rainbows and butterflies. Give me the answers with a lot of love. And I have a lot of resentment because I've given enormous amounts of love to people. And I'm like, don't I deserve to get this in a nice way? And it's like, no, No, that's not how you're gonna get it. So,
But who said it's deserve?
no, a little bit. What I felt like is like, how much pain do I have to be through? I've been in so much pain.
No, but when you say, don't you deserve to get it through love?
Yeah, that's what I was feeling.
maybe
Why do I
if-
deserve it? Because I feel like I love everybody. I love.
But would you have would you have got the message through love?
I don't know.
Did you get the message through
The
love?
first time, eventually,
No,
I did.
I'm saying in the real world, did you get the message through love?
The message that I got.
The message that you're seeking. You're seeking an answer, right?
Yeah.
You understand that there's,
Answers.
You understand that there's a gap between where you are and where you could be.
Yeah.
And you've received a lot of love from people. I mean, for goodness sakes, your friends send you thrones.
This is new.
Right, but
Yeah. No, it's.
that's probably symbolic.
Yeah.
You probably have nice
Yeah, yeah.
relationships. So
Yeah.
you've received a lot of love. But
Yes.
there's still a gap
There's still
between.
a gap.
Right, there's still a gap. Meaning that message hasn't been received through love. Sometimes someone needs an ass kicking. Sometimes the nicest thing you can do
Apparently, I did.
Right. Sometimes the nicest thing you can do for someone is an ass kicking.
Yeah, but I didn't want it because I've gotten ass kickings my whole life, and I didn't want any more. I was like, could you just be nice to me? I didn't get a lot from where I should have gotten it from, and I just be nice. I'm a nice guy. That's what I was saying. I was like, yeah, just be nice to me, and it didn't want to be, but that's fine. I got what I needed, but the truth is, that's the reason I don't go back. I'm like, you're not nice to me. Like,
Right. So what I found, and I'm not,
Be nice
saying,
to
I'm
me.
not saying it's for sure. I've had
Yeah,
journeys
yeah,
that
yeah.
have extended longer even after understanding this, is that those things are often a few breaths away. Like a few good breaths. Just I'm going to surrender it. I'm going to surrender into this.
So that's what happened at the end.
Right, and that can happen during. Right, that can happen during it, and
I definitely think especially in the second one, I had completely lost control. There was no resistance because I was not even in this world. Like
got it.
I had no ability to resist. It was just going into hell, like the worst hell of all existence. And it was everything that I hold dear, that I think is me, was ripped away from me, which I get the message. I get the symbolism, and it was needed. But you know what? I don't want to go back. And I don't want to go
It's
back.
funny that that's your takeaway when it was really
Yeah.
when
I got
when
it.
you got the message about your wife pulling you out of that. It's funny that you describe it as everything that was near and dear to you.
Oh, I thought I lost her too, but she came out of the darkness and pulled
Right.
me back. That was my birth
Right, I'm just
experience.
intrigued that that's not the way you describe it.
What do you mean?
You describe it as everything that was near and dear to you was ripped away from you versus that my wife saved me from the abyss, and I understood that, and that can, like, the medicine showed me that my wife and I had an unbreakable bond, and even if I had nothing, she would be
But
there
first,
for me.
she had to go. That's why it came out.
Sure,
like that.
I'm just
I mean, first she was gone. I thought she was gone. I thought everybody was gone, and then a hand came out. And
exactly
it was wonderful.
right.
You're saying, why don't I focus on the wonderful part of it?
Yeah, like, what's Rocky about? What's the movie Rocky about? The guy winning or the guy getting his ass kicked, right? Both are true,
Right,
right? But you would say the guy won the fight,
right,
right? That's what the story's about.
right.
So what was your journey about? Not like all the stuff that were ripped away, but the fact that there's a connection between you and your wife.
I think ultimately it was an amazing ending.
Right, but you don't describe by the ending. You say that as a by the way.
I don't want to read the book again. that's all I'm saying. It's like, I like the ending. It was great. It was the first one. The ending was great too.
So let me ask you this: you said a couple of times that
Yeah.
during the Adama
Yeah.
thing, you don't want to be vulnerable. You're like, hey, don't call on me. Don't.
Right.
What would you do if I did? Like, what was it that you didn't want to throw in the middle? What was it that?
Well,
holding back?
like I said, I'm really, I feel like I'm in the very early stages of trust. Very early, since this last one. And it's very connected. And I think about it on a daily basis. So there are certain friends and certain relationships that I've let in, and I'm like, okay, you could love me. And even with that, it's like with resistance, and they're feeling it. That's why I'm getting these things. I never got gifts before, but now,
Right.
like, they're feeling it, like, and I'm giving back, but like, it's in a way that they feel me, like I'm there, and they know that they could give me something, and it's special, and I'm sharing that I want it, right? So I feel like I'm in the infant stages of like being vulnerable and allowing people to hold my heart. And when I'm in a group of people I don't know, and I don't know anybody here, I'm not willing to give away this thing that I've been holding near and dear for me for my whole life. I mean,
This thing.
like this vulnerability that I'm like handing over. Like, you get to decide if I get love or not. That's the feeling I have of my whole life, is that every time I reached out and said, please love me, I got hurt. So so now I'm able to do it, but I'm very careful about who I'm giving it to.
Understood.
It's a lot more people. But when I'm doing it in a new group, so I was thinking today, I was like, how long would it take for me to be trusting these people that I do this vulnerable thing with? It was like a weird out-of-body experience. I'm observing myself.
But you're watching a lot of others do that.
I'm watching it, and I always had an incredible jealousy of like watching a movie where like somebody wrecks a room in anger, or like someone said today, like they threw a phone at a wall and it smashed, and I'm so jealous of that level of like loss of control, because I've always felt like if I don't hold it together, I'm just gonna crack into a million zillion pieces. So like it's, like I could get angry, but I must remain intact so that I don't fall into a million zillion pieces.
So knowing all this, and I understand
Yes.
the criticism you have of people who do ayahuasca
Yes.
or other medicines too much, but knowing all this and knowing that there's a tool that has helped you uncover this
Yes.
far, wouldn't the move be to just keep going at it until you feel like this is resolved?
Actually, my friends are saying that. I don't feel a desire to go back, and it's probably because of resistance, and maybe.
Well, no one wants to go back. I mean, people want the result from it. I mean, some people want to go back, but in general, it's not going for it, because it could be too scary. It's the result afterwards. But I'm saying, wouldn't that be the move if you know that there's a gap between where you are, where you could be, and you've seen how this has chipped away at some of the thick armor? It's like, okay, like if I got to go again,
I had a feeling last time if I ever did it again, I may not come back from the abyss.
Your ego may not come back.
I'm just terrified. I'm terrified that I'll end up in that psych ward. Like I felt like I snuck out, and I really felt like if anybody's, if anybody's gonna lose his mind in this, it may be me. That's what the feeling was. I was like, you know what? I love you. You did a lot for me. We're gonna part ways, and that's kind of how I felt, with amazing amount of gratitude. And I have it, but I am utterly
So when
terrified.
your friends who know you well,
Right.
are suggesting that this would probably be the move, just to kind of keep chipping away at it.
Right.
I mean, because that's what it does feel like.
The
ego,
but it's too slow for them.
That's what the ego death feels like. The ego death literally feels like we're gonna die.
Right.
That's yeah.
Right. Death would have been much better. I wish I died in that. This was living in a nightmare where I lose everybody and everything and anything that all these beautiful things around me and that I think make me up. And it said, no, none of that's you. It's just things that you have, that you've gathered, and they're wonderful.
But they're not you.
They're not me. And that was ego death. But man, I was dreaming of dying.
Okay, so why do you think friends who care about you, who you trust, and they're recommending this, why do you think they're recommending that?
I think they think that my movement, that my growth is too slow for them. Meaning, I'm not doing anything wrong. They all love me. But they're like, it's helped you. Same way you're saying. It's helped you. Just get back in there.
Right. Okay, whatever you decide or don't decide. Right?
I feel like it's like you brought up Rocky. This is me going up against the Russian guy.
Yeah, I mean, this is what it is.
I don't know if I want to do it again.
No, ceremonies are tough, right?
Don't put me in, coach.
No, ceremonies are tough. They're not for the faint of heart. Either is life, In a lot of ways, ceremony is just a concentration of life, Just, okay, let's pack in 10 years into 6 hours and then just see what emerges.
Right.
And
so this was super vulnerable. Like I'm doing this on a podcast.
Right, it's true.
It was super vulnerable, and I'm all right with it.
Good. Hopefully you let us publish it too.
You can publish it.
My only point is it's not about you specifically.
Right.
Obviously, choose what you will, and you have your friends and your people. We don't know each other that well, but the concept of someone recognizing there's a a space between where they are and where they want to be.
Right.
And where not only they want to be, they know they could be.
Okay.
And then seeing how a tool has helped them, it's logical to say, let me keep picking up that tool and chipping away at that wall, and some take more than others. I've seen some people, people have that like, that
Right.
shift, and sometimes you see it after 2 or 3 ceremonies. Sometimes you don't see it till 2025. So to me, that's why I'm not sitting there like here to count.
Right.
You're going back every weekend. Maybe the guy's a resistant guy, right? And he needs
Right.
he needs so much more, and someone else is not. I'm thinking like if I came into medicine before my 15 years of therapy and years of 12-step work, I could have been much more resistant. I had 20 minutes of a sexual fantasy. And I gave
That
up.
doesn't sound so bad. No, I'm kidding.
But it did for my
I'm
world,
just-
right?
I'm
From my
just-
perspective,
I'm
that
literally
was.
kidding.
I was been fighting against this for so many years, right? That was.
Yeah.
And I built up all these defenses against it. And 20, 30 minutes in, I said, I'm like, okay, I'm just going to surrender.
Right.
Right. I'm just going to surrender. And that was, anyway.
Yeah.
My point is that it's not, sometimes when we get into someone's story and we hear the details, it's not necessarily the craziest thing to keep picking up the medicine and say, okay, this is giving me something a lot of other things haven't, right? It's clearly chipped away at you in ways that a lot of other things haven't been able to. And for someone to make the conclusion, to come to the conclusion that, hey, let me keep doing this until I get to that spot that I feel okay, is relatively logical.
It's logical. I don't think there's a spot. I think I am heading towards that spot.
Good.
For some reason, I don't have the urge to go back. And
You've explained why. It was scary as hell and
Part
hard
of
as hell.
it
Yeah,
is
yeah.
terrifying.
Yeah.
But I don't
was
have the
referring-
draw to
right.
come back.
I was referring more to your comment about others who keep going back. What
yeah,
I found
so
is that
my
it's
thing is
self-corrects.
very different. I look at them and I'm like, I don't know how you're doing it. I'm pretty impressed. But like some people are. My issue is that we're trying to heal. We're trying to heal and get better. And I'm not talking about like be healed. I don't really like that term. I don't think anybody's healthy in the sense like they've made it to the top of the mountain. I think life is a journey and you're going to get there. And we're always headed there. And even when we get to the place we think we're going to, there's another mountain right behind it that you got to get to. And it's pretty awesome. And it's a great journey. I think that people are chasing the answer, and it's something that I think that addicts are doing also. Like they want an answer to the problem. If something happens. So
But for
what I'm
every-
saying is that
for
I'm
every
staying
one
a little
person-
agnostic. That's what
Okay,
I'm trying
but for
to
every
say.
one person who's doing that, there are another 10 pointing the finger at them, saying they're doing that,
Yes.
so that they don't jump in.
Right.
When all they're worried about is dealing with their own
Right.
stuff and healing their own trauma. And yes, there are many.
I definitely am leaning towards, like, let's give it a shot. But I didn't drink the Kool-Aid. You know what I'm saying? Well, I drank the Kool-Aid. But I'm saying I'm not fully sold. And also my experiences are one experience, and the people I know are other experiences. And then I speak to people who tell me that people end up in psych wards, and they know. And I don't know those people.
I don't know those people either.
Right. And I'm like, who are those people? And they're like,
I don't know those people
There's
either.
people. They tell me there's people. I don't meet them. But like I have with methadone maintenance, everybody knows somebody who's like did it with methadone maintenance. I'm like, who are those people? Could I be introduced to one of them that is doing great, like doing methadone every single day of their life? Like I would like to meet that person. So I don't know that person. So it's like similar to that idea. Like I do think it's headed towards something great, and I am a fan, but I am holding some cynicism to see. I feel like it's brand spanking new. I also will say another thing is that a lot of the people administering it are going into cult-like behaviors, which is something that could happen. Now, I'm not saying anybody did anything really bad, but it's some weird stuff when you're giving someone something so healing. You have a lot of power in that room.
100%. Yeah.
And I've seen some yucky stuff, and I don't think real healing could come through yucky stuff. Like it's hard for me to imagine, So that also, there's no like form of regulation or like, so that makes me nervous. Because,
Not that would make anyone more comfortable, by the way.
No.
A formal regulation, you don't just.
No, I don't think that will work. Listen,
At
we
the
have
end of the day,
have
we should do
therapists
things-
that are
Exactly,
taking
and they have
advantage
formal
of their
regulation.
clients, and they have plenty of
Yeah.
regulation. it just that it's like some sort of Masora would help, like something like we pass this down or some teaching. I've seen people do some really wacky
that's
stuff.
right, but that's the way it originally was done,
Yeah,
right? And now it got interrupted, and that will come back.
I hope
In
so.
the tribes that are doing this for a long time, there's a very, very strict Masora that's passed down. This is the way we do it. This is the age. This is the situation. This is how someone becomes accepted into serving, accepted into the process. All of it. There's a very, very strict and rigid protocol around it.
Right.
And for us, we've been given the keys to a Ferrari with. We don't know what a driver's license is. We don't know if a license exists. We're just driving it. There'll be a few crashes, but I think over time, we'll see good results from it.
I will say one more piece that, again, back to my dream of these communities and connections and all that stuff, I'm not afraid of almost any of this stuff for people if they have that. Meaning, like, even if it's damaging and it does bad things to them, or they thought they were cured and they're not cured, but they're surrounded with this vessel of connection and people around them, they'll be all right. That's kind of how I feel. Meaning, I don't know if this is the answer, but I know that if you have that incredible community around you, then you'll survive it. That's really where I'm at. So I know I'm pulling it back to my own stuff, but I see that in people. Like, people will, like, even if you end up in the psych ward for it, but you have a family and a community that's waiting for you when you come out, like, you'll be all right. Like, that's what I've seen. That I've seen. So I'm not so afraid to take these risks. I just don't know if it's the answer. I do know that whatever we try, we need to be surrounded with this unconditional, enormous amount of community. So I'm not as afraid as other people. I'm not. I am afraid if you're a guy who's sitting in his basement, hasn't done anything in your life, and he's just going out to try some earth-shattering experience. It might work for him, but I'm a little afraid because I don't know what he's coming back to. And actually, one of the beautiful things I found with ayahuasca and these is that there is a community. Meaning, like, a lot of these guys, their fellowship is the people that are doing it.
There is one that's forming more and more. There's no
right.
question.
And
about
that, to me, is like, oh, wow, that's like a twofer.
And that's what's going to happen, that as it matures, these things will get sorted out, and people have bad experiences, and you learn from them, and so on.
Yeah.
Okay. This podcast got a little long, so final thoughts.
Final thoughts. First of all, I absolutely loved being the person on the podcast, which is super fun. I really liked it because I didn't know what was coming, and it was like, it felt like kind of an adventure for me. So I appreciate that. I'm thankful. My final thoughts really are that, like, I'm really happy that people like you are out there. I'm not trying to, like, butter you up, but I'm saying is that the fact that we have the ability to do whatever we want, and we have freedom to do whatever we want. We could take our resources and do whatever we want with them, and we choose to make a podcast about healing and growth and, like, spreading goodness in the world. It just gives me such faith in humanity. And, like, I hope to be that guy also. Like, that I'm going to take this beautiful world that we have and spread to 1 million people the message of, you're fine already. You know, like, you are already fine. If you could just strip away the stuff, if Sony could take his walls down, he's fine. He's really fine, and he's very loved and beloved and a special person. I want to tell that to everybody and myself. But like, the fact that you could do anything. I mean, I drove up to this house. It's a beautiful house. You could go on vacation, and you decided as a passion to come out and do this. To me, I'm like, this is possibly how we're going to build community in this unbelievable amount of option world. And so that's my final thoughts, that I feel really honored to have been on your podcast and to see what you're doing. And I love it.
Thanks. I appreciate that. If I can share one final thought, because as you were speaking, I was thinking about one thing you said during it, which may be kind of one of the main defenses that keep you from wanting to go all in on the healing. And as you were talking about you call this a passion. Yeah, I'm passionate about it. It's not a passion, it's a purpose. And it's not just a passion, it's a purpose. And a lot of it became clear to me after working through some of the more difficult moments in ceremony that I needed to do something with this. Oftentimes when I wanted to make change in the world before ayahuasca, I would call a rabbi or someone, hey, what about doing this event or that event? And I was like, Ellie, just stop working through people. Just do what it is you want to do, say what it is you want to say. And, the people who gravitate will gravitate. But in order to put an event together, I don't need to call a rabbi and have him propped up in Manila. I can do it. And those want to come will come. And that's it. It doesn't, I don't need to work through other people in that way. And a lot of what gave me the testes for that was through the medicine. And it came in the form of both a purpose and a direction and a purpose. Hey, this is, I remember I was in Costa Rica after an ayahuasca ceremony. I was sitting there lying outside talking to one of the guys. I was with Ryan Carter, who helped me a lot with this podcast, like setting it up. And at that time, there was no video. We're doing a little audio stuff and some webinars and putting it out there. And we're doing much less. I was like, we got to get back to it. And he's like, yeah, we must. We're just so clear from that state that we had to do, that more of this had to be done. So it's not an accident that you're recognizing that. And while we're talking about the medicine as well. But what I did want to say is that during the course of the podcast, you shared that you've done incredible things, right, in terms of the healing, and you almost attributed it to some of the stuff that maybe you call them insecurities.
Okay.
It seemed to be. We can go back to the tape. But you didn't use the word insecurities.
Right.
But whatever this stuff is.
Yeah.
Right. That you said, I'm a good guy who's done good things. I've created this. I want to do good with the world, put out love. But I don't want to be vulnerable. I don't want to get hurt. But this way of working in the world has worked to help many people. So it almost seemed to me, and maybe I'm wrong, that part of the defense for it is, hey, if I cleared all of this up, would I stop doing what is good in the world?
Oh, I've thought of that much.
Right.
And it has happened.
In terms of?
I don't need to help people anymore. I want to help people, and sometimes I don't even want to, but I know it's something that I should do, that I'd be proud of, I should say. It used to be earlier on, and before I did this work, it was literally my existence, and my wife had to be the person to pull me back and say, hey, this is your family, remember us? You're running around and thinking you need to change the world to be special. You're already special. Look at home. We had long discussions about it, and I don't feel that anymore. As a matter of fact, sometimes it's brutally difficult to go and do the work because I'd much rather not be doing this right now. I have other things I'd like to do. I have really cool hobbies and things I'm interested in. It definitely has started to happen, and there is definitely a little bit of a fear of that. But yeah, I think you're onto something. But it has happened.
Right. So I want to speak to that for a second, because that was one of my main fears getting into recovery around money, because I knew that a lot of what drove my business pursuits was major insecurities. And I was worried that if I went to heal them, then where was the fuel going to come from for business?
Right.
And in fact, the risk did materialize in that as I got into recovery more and more, I began to hate money. I hated the way of life. I hated the fact that so many people were obsessed with it. I wanted nothing to do with it. There were moments where if someone would have taken my business, I was just like, here, just take it. I mean, realistically, I didn't have anyone to, and I still had to, kind of be responsible, but it wasn't with any passion. It was just kind of, dotting the I's, crossing the T's because I had to. I had this responsibility. I had a business to run and responsibilities commitments we made, responsibilities we had, and I did it, but with almost no passion. And over the course of several years, as I've realized that a lot of my passions in the world cost a lot of money, I got reinvigorated that came reinvigorated with a much more pure purpose, less likely to hurt unsuspecting bystanders in the process, whatever that means. It could be my wife and kids by being too obsessed because I'm searching for something there, whatever it is, right? Just less likely to make a mess of things, and for it to be more pure. And because it's not coming from an insecurity, it's it doesn't dry up. It doesn't feel like it's wearing me out. It's not. It's in line with who I am. So when it's too much, I can take a step back. When it feels right, then I can move forward. So while it's true on some level, I feel like it's kind of the definition of smashing an idol and trusting God.
Yeah, no, I'm in this process. I'm deeply in. I like that this turned into a therapy session for me, but no, I'm saying, I will say that I've been much more successful in my work since I don't need it. That is true, and people have acknowledged me a lot more when I have boundaries. Like, I'm going home now, and they're like, "Oh, your time is really worth time." And like
yeah, clearly we both don't have great boundaries because it's past midnight.
Is it past midnight?
Probably, and we're doing this. I don't know what time it is.
Yeah, it's late.
Right. So clearly we both don't.
The boundaries are not great, but
right.
It has improved, and I'm shocked by it.
No, it's also wanting and not needing, because
Right.
needing always is also a form of taking. It's not so much. I'm not saying things actually for you, okay? Because some of those things I can say offline. But what I've noticed sometimes is when someone puts something out there, it's kind of shtika da, right? Silence is admission. So if you say something and I sometimes don't, if there is a challenge inside and I don't voice it, it can appear to be that I okayed it. So I just want to.
Gotcha.
Right.
I love it.
So not for yourself, just for.
No, I really have.
No, I
loved
know
it.
your resistance already. I'm not going to get through to you. Ayahuasca, stuff like that, if you choose to drink. Ayahuasca has a hard time with you. I'm going to have a very hard time with you, or impossible time. I'm sharing it more for others, just that idea of we're living off our insecurities.
Yeah.
And if we let our insecurities go, what are we going to have? And that's like, to me, it's like an idol, where it's people serve idols because the idol, it gave them something. It wasn't serving a statue. They were getting something from it, right? In Egypt, these guys were figuring out how to do real things from whatever these powers were.
Right.
You know, these astrologers were making
I
stuff
see
happen.
this happen most with people with anxiety. Like,
They
when you have
use
anxiety,
anxiety, yes.
and if you tell them, they're so terrified to give up their anxiety because they think that's the only thing that's
Exactly.
fueling
So
them.
they're worshiping their anxiety.
Right.
And the move there
Yeah.
is to smash the idol of anxiety and trust that God has another way to deliver all the
Right.
benefits without the cost.
Yeah, it's hard.
It's very hard.
It's hard.
It's the hardest work in the world.
All right.
Well, thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much. It was awesome.
Appreciate it.